The story opens with a massive, three-headed demon, causing widespread destruction and death throughout the city. Civilians are desperately trying to escape, unsure of where to go, and food wasn't a problem for him. He saw a bug fly by, which he knocked down by throwing a stone at it. From the beginning, stink bugs aren't very tasty, especially because of the bitter aftertaste that they bird dared to come near that beach. Clack responded that he too had witnessed hell when his sister was murdered by a demon, and he would never forget it. He mentioned that the demon had a Justavation mark around his neck, and that one day it would surely eliminate him, but suddenly the two of them were on the shore and saw something in the distance that scared the turtle, even though it was quite ordinary for a rooster. Not far away, in the ocean, they spotted a demon. It was quite large, capable of enveloping an entire ship with its long body. It was a demon in the shape of a snake with fish limbs, who was sad because the demon she had loved and been with for 10 years had not left his wife for her. Clack immediately ran over there to help, but remembered that he didn't know how to swim. Meanwhile, the demon tightened its grip, threatening to destroy all the passengers. Clack climbed onto the turtle's shell, and it headed towards the ship at full speed. When the demon was about to devour the people in the ship, Clack said that they wouldn't arrive in time, but the turtle sped up, and the rooster, he jumped off his friend's back with all his strength, and the rooster flew towards the demon at a dizzying speed. As he approached, he used resonance and began spinning in the air, piercing the demon, and he killed him by creating a massive hole in his body. He searched for the monster's mark, but it wasn't there. The turtle then took Clark back to the other side, telling him that he would allow him to stay for a while. Even though he didn't even know his name, he would wait for him after he avenged his sister, because the turtle felt that Clark was a worthy opponent and deserved respect. But as soon as the rooster mentioned apartments, the turtle immediately disappeared into the ocean. The story then shifts to a town where we see a middle-aged man selling chickens at the market. Among his chickens, there is Clark felt it in his mouth, but they tasted good to him. He turned in the other direction and saw some children playing in the yard. Clark did not like children. They could be rude and cruel and nice little chick who tries her best to cheer up those around her, but ends up only annoying everyone. The other chickens try to silence her. They were angry because the man that they supported them, he was betraying them, and apparently, they didn't like it. The man was illegally selling chickens, and the police gave him one final warning, telling him not to do it again. He returned home and placed food in their cage. Everyone started eating, but the little chicken didn't have any room. The older and bigger chickens pushed him away from the food. The man picked up the chick and fed it, separately from all the others. Later that night, the man had a drink while watching television, with the chick sitting in his lap. Then, the chick's attention became fixed on the protagonist of the action movie. He noticed that his supposed father and the character in the movie had the same tattoo on their back. The tattoo was of a carp climbing a waterfall and was called Coin Note Kinbor, which symbolizes the will to become a good person. The girl wanted one of these for herself and pointed to her back. The good man grabbed a marker and wrote the word. The morality on his back explained the meaning of the word to him. It means protecting the weak and not being afraid of the strong. Suddenly, the man felt a pain in his neck, and for some reason, a huge boil appeared that hadn't been there before. The next day, the other chick started to tease the chick again about what was written on its back. He tried to explain that it was a special word written by his dad, but he failed. Dad came home with another person carrying him on their shoulder. The chick's father was called Yuso. He had a swollen face, and the man carrying him was his friend Talima. He had been beaten up for a debt he hadn't paid to a gang on time. It wasn't the worst outcome because they didn't kill him. Yuso realized that. Very noisy. Suddenly, two girls approached him, thinking that Clack was a cute little chick who was lost and hungry. One of the girls wanted to feed the rooster a fried chicken thigh. He needed another source of income since selling chickens wasn't earning him enough. Hearing this, Talim said that he was thinking of starting a cleaning company, so that Yuso could finally earn a legitimate living. Lighting a cigarette, Tai proposed a partnership to him so he could have money. Yusu heard this kind offer and burst into tears. Temime smiled and said, "That's what true brothers do." The little chick didn't understand anything, but he was still happy for his father nonetheless. However, Temime asked him for a favor in return. A few days later, Yusu was watching TV when he heard a knock on the door. Some strangers approached him and, showing him a document, told him that he now owed them 10 million yen because he was his friend's guarantor, and his friend had run away from his friend who had run away. So Yusu would have to give them all the money. He was shocked, memories flashing in his head of his childhood, when his mother, promising him that she would return soon, abandoned him, and at school they made fun of him calling him abandoned and useless. Therefore, the anger that Yusu had always kept in his heart overflowed this time, and the boil on his neck began to boil the chick, he screamed, trying to shout to his father, but it was too late. The boil grew until good old Yuso transformed into a ruthless demon. At that moment, at a restaurant on the next block, his mother bought her son a sea urchin. Clack was at the glass window, drooling at the sight of the sea urchin. The sight frightened the children. Suddenly, Clack heard a noise somewhere nearby. He had already realized that he wouldn't get to try the sea urchin today and would probably be left hungry. Yuso became a big monster with about a man-fish torso that resembled his tattoo. He also grew horns and fangs. The little boy tried to stop his father because he had already started destroying everything around him. The monster grabbed, fried, which made Clark cringe. A boy grabbed him by the neck and showed Clack to his friend, and together they started walking away from the playground, discussing the fact that Clack, the bus that was full of people when, suddenly, our hero Clack appeared. He diverted the monster's attention, who abandoned the bus and focused on Clack. What used to be, Yuso said, that he wasn't trash, and if Clack thought otherwise, he would regret it. Clack decided, without wasting time, to finish him off immediately. But the moment he tried to react, he heard the chicken scream, and, begging them not to touch his father. This came as a surprise to Clack. The demon tried to kill Clack while he was confused, but the rooster skillfully dodged him and then used his signature trick. Characteristic move. The demon immediately began to swell and, in a few seconds, exploded, just like all the monsters that Clack had encountered along the way. Clack picked up the chick, led him to a safe distance. The chick watched the monster live out its last seconds and realized that it had once been his father. He tried to wake him up, but he showed no signs of life. Clack informed him that it was unlikely he would be able to move. The chicken's tears flowed, and he began to cry. Then he threw himself at the rooster, began to beat him, and mutter something cruel and merciless without. But something strange happened. Yuso's body separated from the demon and lay unconscious, but still alive. Clack determined that the reason he hadn't died was that enough time hadn't passed yet. Time. And that the chick had also played an important role in Yuso's life with its presence. The chick realized that Clack wanted to kill Yuso, but he was trying to save him, protecting the Alit, weak and not fearing the strong. The little chick remembered his father's words about justice, feeling them resonate in his heart. He noticed Clack running away with a sense of accomplishment. The chick wondered if he should have followed his heart and gone with Clack, or stayed with his old life with his father. Then Yuso told him to find someone he loves. Crying, the chick ran after. Was quite big and they could eat him. The girls admonished them, telling them that the rooster was injured and that they should not grab it by the neck like that. Meanwhile, Clack was already thinking. The rooster. He told him that he was very grateful and that he wanted Clack to take him along. Hearing this, Clack quickly tried to discourage the chick by telling him that he hated children, thus making it clear that they were not on the right path. But Polito, despite Clack's prohibition, went after him anyway. Yuso wakes up in the hospital, and a few days later, they are waiting for him. More good news. Talim, his former friend who stole the money, has been captured. Meanwhile, a disgusting one-eyed demon wreaks havoc in a town. Suddenly, another bird appeared out of nowhere. Determined to take revenge on the monster, he was a thunderbird who wielded cool new weapons and abilities. With great joy, he defeated the monster. Now, from the looks of it, there are two birds fighting against the demons. Here, the chick is already running after Clack, but he wasn't going to slow down at all. On the contrary, he was going very fast and paid no attention to the chick. Polito remembered the rooster's words that he hates children, so when he felt hungry, he decided to look for food on his own. Looking through the bushes, he saw a disgusting worm and didn't understand how. The adults found it delicious, so the chick started simply eating plant leaves, figuring that would be enough for him. Suddenly, he heard noises and screams from people were running quickly in his direction. The chick immediately realized what was happening and didn't want to be left alone, while another monster wreaked havoc nearby. People were running away from a huge slug that wanted to eat them. A girl fell to the ground and couldn't get up in time. Overcome with fear of such a monster, she froze and begged that it wouldn't touch her. The monster offered her a deal. If she solved the riddle, he wouldn't eat her. The riddle was, Gnome was racing a race car at the bottom of the sea. What number did he finish? In order to escape from those stupid boys, he took advantage of a moment when the boys were shouting at the girls and tried to escape, but the first attempt was in vain, and they told him that that was why they would give him up. Gnome? The girl wondered, but the slug didn't want to hear the answer. He laughed loudly and immediately said that cars don't drive on the bottom of the sea. He immediately grabbed the girl with his foul tongue and prepared to eat. Just then, Clark came to the rescue with all his might. striking the monster's tongue and causing the girl to fall to the ground. The monster, discouraged by such actions, looked around and spotted a rooster perched high above. This enraged him, as he had a deep hatred for birds. Clark invited the monster to fight him. He noticed how the nasty little slugs that, in any case, were larger than the rooster itself, began to crawl and try to kill it. They began to attack Clark, but he dodged them in every way he could, having managed to outwit the slugs. Clark filled his lungs with air and with all his might, unleashed the power of his voice. But something strange happened. The monster did not die. Instead, he recovered his body and smiled maliciously at Clark, who realized that he was a true demon. Clark continued to strike at Yumi, but soon grew tired. Yumi laughed. He is immortal and will soon kill this rooster. Previous demons that the rooster had defeated had died because he had destroyed their hearts and brains. This slug's weak point was in its tail, and Clack didn't know it, but now Clack realized, and he knew what he had to do. He inhaled as deeply as he could and used resonance. Only this time he used it multiple times and at different angles. He completely destroyed the monster, leaving no area intact. The strategy worked. The little hen breathed a sigh of relief when it was all over, but it had only just begun. Part of the monster's body survived, and Clack rushed to help the girl who was still sitting there. The monster's teeth sank into Clack, and he was badly injured. He fell unconscious, and Chi pulled him to a secluded place so that people wouldn't find them. Trying to eat the cat. Clack was really scared, so he did everything he could to escape and started running as fast as he could, getting away from the boys to avoid them trying to catch him. Chi ran, looking for food and water for Clack. The only thing that worried and scared her at that moment was the rooster's well-being, who often had to flee from predators or from the cars raced through the heat and rain, searching for water and food for Clack. After a while, the rooster woke up and saw the chick. He felt flattered by what she had done, but still, in his own way, he tried to sneak away while she was sleeping. The chick was surprised by this action, but Clack set a condition. If she could keep up with him, he would let her go, but he wasn't going to wait for anyone. Suddenly, lightning attacked Clack from above. He dodged the attack and saw the black hen in front of him, who apparently had a past with Clack and wanted to kill him. Clack, for his part, didn't remember who the black hen was, and he didn't care because he wasn't one to give up in a fight. Clack asked her who she was and why she had a problem with him. She was surprised that he didn't remember her and began telling her story. From the beginning, she had been raised by rich, lonely people who gave her a lot of attention and love, treating her like a member of the family. One day, a monster attacked her. He had wealth and wanted to crush her family. But then, the one who saved them all by destroying the monster appeared, and she instantly fell in love with him. That afternoon, they strolled along the promenade, sharing their stories under the bright moonlight. The two of them spent a romantic night together. Elizabeth realized that she was happy with him and rushed to tell him, but the rooster didn't want to hear it. He wanted to hear nothing of it. It was just a moment of weakness and nothing more. That's what he told himself after every night of revelry. He left, without looking back, in search of adventure, leaving Elizabeth crying. That's why Elizabeth wants to kill him. The punishment for breaking her heart will be death. Chi was surprised to learn that the chicken was Clack's ex, and the rooster, in turn, listened to the whole story without. He ran towards the patio where the old man was and hid in the bushes. Surely the man would throw the angry boys out of his yard. If they wanted a rooster, the boys ran. Change his expression for even a second. Elizabeth decided to deliver a fatal blow to her ex as revenge for everything he had done. But the rooster cunningly managed to dodge all of her attacks. He decided not to fight her and simply flee, and she pursued him. They ran through the city, passing people who stared in surprise at the crazed chickens. They continued fighting, and just as Elizabeth aimed her thunder staff at Clack, he jumped towards her, grabbed her paw, and catching her off guard, kissed Elizabeth in the middle of the fight. It brought back the memories that Elizabeth cherished so much. Clack then stepped back, saying that she didn't really intend to kill him, so there was no point in fighting. Finally, the people called the police to break up the chicken fight. When they saw the police officers, the three of them ran off into the woods. Clack, Elizabeth, and the chicken managed to find safety in the forest. The hen began yelling at Elizabeth for trying to steal her rooster. Now Elizabeth was more surprised than anyone and started to become jealous of Clack, as if they were already in a relationship. She calmed down and told him that she had traveled a long way to see Clack again, and that she wanted to kill all the monsters and demons. When she returned to the city after the rooster, when he abandoned her, she realized that all her friends, whom she loved dearly, had been killed, and the city around her had been destroyed. Many parts of the country were experiencing similar problems, so she set out to destroy the demons. Clack didn't share that goal, as all he wanted was to avenge his sister and destroy a specific monster he hadn't yet found. Clack had told this to Elizabeth that night, 6 months prior. Elizabeth remembered his story well and took her phone out of her bag. She explained to Clack and Sheik that it was a human-made device that, to the patio, and they asked him to give them back Clack, to which he replied that Clack was his rooster. He saw Clack looking at him and felt that the boys were lying to him. He apologized and told them. It contained a lot of useful and helpful information. She found images of demons on the phone and began searching for a specific one. There are many types of demons. For example, one of the most recent types is, there are red and blue beast demons, but recently, variations of them have begun to appear. They generally want to destroy and kill, but not all of them do. These variants display human emotions. Some attack people, others remain isolated and don't bother anyone, and some even help people in any way they can. They can be any color, green, brown, purple, and so on. However, what he wanted to show Clark was a video that had been circulating online. It depicted an enormous white dragon destroying a city with a wave of its hand. It contained a firebird, and Clark was horrified to recognize his sister Sara within it. He was deeply affected and left to be alone. Elizabeth and Chi went to rest in a quiet and beautiful place on the outskirts of the city. Elizabeth used a navigation app to find a place where the three of them could relax, a hot spring. Chi was overjoyed to see the water. He immediately pounced on her, but Clack didn't seem his usual happy self, and Elizabeth noticed right away. When she learned that he couldn't swim, she started laughing at him. He called her not a rooster, but a defenseless egg. Clack tried to change the subject, but it turned into an altercation, and the hen knocked him into the water. That was enough to make him start shouting that he was drowning. It was especially embarrassing when he realized there wasn't much water. Then he adopted a serious expression again. Then Elizabeth threw a wet towel over Clack's head and went into the water. He dreamed that once he had dealt with all the monsters, he would live as he had before. Suddenly, the hen, who was jealous of the rooster, intervened, that he was sorry that his rooster had escaped, since he had never done so before. He promised it wouldn't happen again, and thanked them for bringing Clack home. The boys went home, knowing that made Elizabeth incredibly angry. Then the chick approached Clack and asked him to think of a name for her. He immediately came up with the name Pyoko, which translates to, my little chick. Elizabeth tried to argue that Clack should think a little more before giving him such a name, but Pyoko was delighted. It was a name her husband had given her, and she would always treasure it, like a treasure. Yes, Pyoko considered Clack her beloved husband. Elizabeth asked about the inscription on her back, to which Pyoko replied in a hoarse tone that her father had written it, written by her father. This sign meant that she always helps people with problems. The chicken also started talking about her father, and suddenly, Pyoko's eyes filled with tears. She remembered her father and ran out of the pool. A few hours later, Pyoko was sitting next to Clack, who was obviously feeling unwell because he had been in the hot water for too long. Hot water. Suddenly, a small monster appeared in front of the two. Clack immediately prepared to confront it, but some of the mud slipped from his face, and they saw that it was not the monster, but rather Elizabeth. She had read on the internet that mud baths are very good for the skin. The sun was setting. Pyoko was dozing on the lounge chair, and Clark was standing by the lake, and was thinking about the white demon. He thought about the video where he saw the firebird, and it reminded him too much of his sister Sara, or maybe not. He wondered if it was the demon he had been searching for so long. Time searching for. Elizabeth had told him that this type of demon could evolve, so a few drastic changes shouldn't deter them, and the mark on his neck was proof enough that they needed to find the white demon first and figure out the rest on the ground. Suddenly, they turned around and saw that Pyoko was nowhere to be found. Where? They can only run. Suddenly, an evacuation alert blares. Little Yuki, struggling to keep up with his mother, trips over a rock and falls. The monster lifts him high into the air. The man had lied to them, but they couldn't do anything. They couldn't contradict him. Suddenly, they heard the sound of the walls creaking, and at that moment a huge paw came through the wall in. Where could she have gone? It turned out that the cat had taken her and fled with her into the forest. They immediately began to chase after the cat that had kidnapped Pyoko. Clark noticed. He quickly followed the trail and figured out which direction to run. Meanwhile, Pyoko did everything possible to escape the cat's clutches, and succeeded. She hid from her in a burrow. He tried to reach her before Clack and Elizabeth caught up. The cat was ready to fight Clack for her prey, and just as the fight was about to begin, the kittens, they came running towards her, begging for food. The cat had kidnapped Pyoko to feed her children, which moved Elizabeth. Since she would have laid an egg anyway, she decided to help the mater. Cat, She did so, and the kittens finally ate for the first time in 10 days. The strange thing was that this cat had an owner. She seemed domesticated, yet they were still starving. He asked why the owner wasn't feeding them. The cat lowered her head, but before she could explain anything, Clack noticed something very strange. He saw a town where the cat apparently lived. The people of that town was digging holes. Old men, women, and children were doing the work. Judging by their appearance, it was clear that none of these people were in their right mind. They looked utterly creepy. Cat then explained that it happened exactly 10 days ago, after the monster arrived in their town. Somehow, it had controlled the people, forcing everyone to dig holes all over the town, and now it lived in a mansion on the outskirts of town. They locked all the children in the barn, didn't give them any food, and a watchman guarded them at all times. At that moment, inside the barn, the children decided that if they didn't escape now, they would starve to death, or, even worse, be killed. Together, they broke down the doors, and the oldest of the children jumped on the guard and restrained him, ordering At that moment, the old man brought Clack a treat that seemed simple, but Clack couldn't take his eyes off it and immediately began to eat it quickly, barely even tasting it. Girls to flee immediately. However, another guard appeared and pointed a gun at the boy. Just then, Clack and Elizabeth appeared and disarmed both men. She then took out her smartphone, typed a message, and ordered the children to quickly tie up the men before they woke up or anyone else saw them. The children were surprised that the chicken used a smartphone, that the chicken was using a smartphone so expertly. The children took all of them to a boy's house where they hid. The boy told them that they must all be city police officers. Elizabeth realized that the children hadn't asked the police for help because the monster would have forced them to obey him as well, since he was strong and cunning. The boy who just took them in was a half-orphan. His mother had died when he was very young, so he had learned to cook for himself. Polito tried to find out more about the monster, but since the children had been in the barn the entire time, they didn't know much or hadn't heard much about it. Then Elizabeth asked Clack to accompany her to the mansion where that demon lived the next day, to which Clark refused, saying he only wanted revenge on his sister. Not any of this. It wasn't his business, and he didn't want to get involved. He sounded very selfish and heartless. Suddenly, Clark felt a strange sensation. Lord Rot had arrived. That's what he called the extreme natural urges he experienced once or twice a year. He immediately lashed out at Elizabeth, who pushed him away. Immediate one. So she decided to seize this great opportunity by setting conditions. She would help him with his problem if he agreed to accompany her to the mansion, but Clark was willing to do anything at that moment. Later that night, when everyone was asleep, he was already awake. He held an old photo of his entire family in his hand and was thinking about. The grandfather was delighted that the rooster enjoyed the food he had prepared so heartily. He sat nearby and told Clack about his wife, who loved to feed the sparrows that flew into their yard. Clark couldn't sleep either. He couldn't get Elizabeth's words out of his head. In the morning, when everyone woke up, he wasn't in bed. The children told Elizabeth that she should. Going to the demon mansion was stupid and reckless, so why did he go there? It turns out that AI's father is a demon. Somehow, AI infiltrated the mansion and stood his ground. In front of a huge, ugly demon that wore brooches all over its body as clothing, Clack was determined to kill this ugly monster. The demon laughed at the boy and wanted to devour him. A took out his pistol and demanded that the demon return his father. The demon threw the boy aside with all his might, and one of the fasteners on the monster's body popped open. The boy saw his father trapped inside and begged him to stop all the horror. It turned out that his family was heavily in debt, owing 5 million yen, and A's father was a gambling addict, but also an unlucky man, who wasted all their money, accumulated loans, and then drank, ignoring his son's pleas to stop and start living a normal life. He yelled at his son, saying that he didn't understand. Nothing about the meaning of life suggested he had a long-term plan, as he had found an old treasure chest where he deciphered a scroll and discovered that some bandits had hidden a lot of gold, and he was sure he would find it and become rich. At that moment, a strange boil appeared on his neck, just like the one Pillow's father had. He spent an entire year digging, but never found anything. It was as if he had lost his mind at that moment, and there were consequences. A demon began to emerge from him. Isai cried and told his father that he didn't need him to be rich, that he only wanted him and his father to be together and live like normal people. The father did not appreciate this. Like the demon consuming him, he was sad that he hadn't spent enough time with her and longed to be with her again, but she was gone. The old man smiled at the rooster, because, interested in money, a lot of money. The demon grew in size and was preparing to kill the child when he was suddenly saved by Clack, who took him out of the house. Clack, Elizabeth, and Poloko positioned themselves. Facing the demon, they were ready for a fight. Clack was surprisingly angry and already eager to battle the beast, while Pyoko, in the background, urged him to do it as soon as possible. The demon wanted to Clack hypnotize the bears, but it only worked on the chicken. He despised them, calling them little worms, and smiled smugly, considering them as helpless as all the others he had made. Dig holes for him, turning them into his slaves. Then Elizabeth flew up to the monster and tried to electrocute it, to which the demon just smirked with satisfaction. It had no effect on him, and, every time Clack approached him, he opened a beam of energy on the side from which he was approaching, and the rooster had no way to attack, even with resonance. The demon was too fast, making it impossible. The demon laughed, saying that he would eat them like he eats money. It then became evident that the clasps all over his body were actually wallet clasps. All attempts to counterattack the efforts against the monster were in vain, and he even asked Clack not to kill his dad. Finally, Elizabeth came up with an idea. She asked Clack to lure the monster to the power plant. They ran through the monster, city, and the monster followed them. Meanwhile, Pyoko was still hitting her head against a tree under the effects of hypnosis, and the cat couldn't bear to watch her suffer indifferently, so he took her to another place so the girl could calm down. They led the monster to a power plant, started up some machines, and electricity struck the monster. The plan worked, and the quarter demon was paralyzed for a moment. Immediately, Clack used his resonance technique to blow up the monster without killing the father it contained. The hypnosis was over. He had just talked to him about his past, mistaking the common rooster for a normal conversational partner. Suddenly, they heard screams and commotion coming from the houses. A huge monster with a head and 3 fingers. It disappeared instantly, and all the inhabitants who had been digging holes woke up without remembering anything. Clack immediately remembered the promise that Elizabeth had made to him. In fact, she told him that she would never do something like that to him again, especially after he had abandoned her once before. Clack became enraged and unleashed his anger on the father, deciding to punish him in this manner. His rage was immense. The father immediately shielded his son, and then threw him away from danger, begging the rooster not to touch him. His son was the only person he had left in the world that he loved. The rooster, once he had calmed down, left them alone and returned to his companions. Elizabeth was not at all pleased that Clack had attacked that defenseless man and had used the power of resonance on him. And then, Clack began to bother her again, driven by his unfulfilled desires. He immediately received what he deserved from Elizabeth as a result. After that bit of mischief, Clack collapsed to the ground. Lord Rutt walked away, leaving the rooster behind indefinitely. Elizabeth was a little worried that she might have overreacted, but even so, that insolent and selfish rooster had deserved something like that for a long time. Meanwhile, someone was watching them, recording a lot of great footage and taking many pictures. He's sure he'll be famous, and maybe even rich, if he sells those files. The events lead us to a neighboring city. People were arguing vehemently about the video that was going viral on the internet. School children, on public transportation, on the street, all had their attention glued to Elizabeth's video. And Clack, destroying a demon. Many didn't believe it was real, thinking it was a setup and simply crazy. Surely someone just decided to become famous this way, right? But people incredibly liked these characters. Everyone admired them and wanted to see more of them. We now see the team walking through the city streets, not understanding, spread terror just by watching him act. He was glad that this month he could finally fulfill one rule, to kill and destroy enough. Among the crowd of fleeing men, Clack and the grandfather, why people were reacting to them like that. Before, they had wondered about the chickens in the middle of the city, but now this was something different. People weren't chasing them away or scaring them, they were smiling at them. They were taking photos and talking amongst themselves. Pyoko thought everyone would have noticed how cute she was, but that wasn't the case. Suddenly, they heard someone running towards them from behind. It was 2 men, who were running towards them with a net, intending to catch them. Clack, Elizabeth, and Pyoko started running away from the villains. The men were shouting at them to stop as they chased after them, waving their nets. They could barely keep up with them. Perched in a tree, a black silhouette resembling some kind of bird was observing everything, intently watching Clack, happy to have finally found him. Meanwhile, the restaurant was filled with the usual hustle and bustle of parents spending time with their children. Sitting there in the establishment was the same man who had filmed the cockfight and demons. He was smiling and feeling unusually proud of what he had done because the video had accumulated over 1 million views, and that it meant that he could finally fulfill his dream of becoming a popular YouTuber. But it was clear that his intentions were less than noble, as he had sent those men to capture Clack and Elizabeth. Clack and Elizabeth were to be used later for his content. He was grateful to fate, because on the day he filmed Clack, he had originally gone to the forest to hunt bugs, but quite the opposite happened. Quite the opposite occurred, and he witnessed an epic battle. Then he followed the chickens to the city, where a trap in the form of trappers was already waiting for them, but now they were trying to escape from him. Which of course he was not going to allow, and he was certain he would catch them because he needed them to carry out his plan. Meanwhile, the team was desperately trying to get away from their pursuers. They recognized the thugs who were chasing Clack. Suddenly, one of the boys fell to the ground, unable to get up. Quickly, the monster spotted him and targeted him directly. The old man, pursuers. They turned down another street, went through a gate, and found themselves in a kind of courtyard. Elizabeth checked to see if the men chasing them had spotted them. Luckily, the men searched around, but they couldn't find the chickens. Then, Elizabeth turned in the other direction and looked around. She first spotted a huge chicken coop. It was full of excited and very noisy chickens. This chicken coop was located in what looked like a school. Elizabeth was only distracted for a few minutes when Clack returned to his previous activities. Apparently, Lord Rut wasn't leaving him alone, because Clack immediately noticed an unfamiliar chicken and started to bother it. The chickens and Pillow began to scream and cause a big commotion. Elizabeth approached from behind and subdued Clack with an electric shock. Pillow immediately went back to his old habits, fighting and insulting Elizabeth, shouting that he didn't like Clack, that he had almost killed him, and that this was his revenge. The chicken was tired of hearing these things, because it wasn't the first time this child had allowed herself such words and behavior. He also humiliated Nave, calling her the girl who didn't grow up, and she even had a stupid inscription on her back. That was enough to make Nave cry, but Elizabeth continued and yelled at Nave that she had absolutely no interest in a pervert as stupid and pathetic as Clack, and she didn't need him for anything. The henchmen in the background were stunned by what they saw. A young rooster. He was especially impressed by all of this as he watched Elizabeth hold Nave down with one paw while she tried to flail her paws. Who are these strange chickens, and why are they behaving so strangely? A chicken that knows how to use dangerous power tools, and this strange, screaming chicken with strange writing on her back. I've never seen anything. He quickly ran towards him, shielding the boy with his own body. The monster was about to crush them both when Clack struck its massive hand with all his speed, managing to knock it away from the and this rooster, who was stranger than all of them combined, entered his house, immediately broke the lock on the cage, and began to bother the hens in the hen house. He behaved so primitively brash and stupid. He was certainly the worst kind of guy a young rooster had ever seen, and he certainly didn't want to be like him. One day, Elizabeth realized that the chickens, they stared open-mouthed, and he rushed to apologize to them, to calm them down and tell them that they weren't strange. He apologized for invading their territory, telling them that bad people were chasing them, so that the three of them needed a place to hide. The chickens were surprised, but didn't mind the trio spending some time in their chicken coop. Suddenly, Elizabeth's phone received an alert, and she took it out of her pocket. The young rooster was startled. The chicken was using a device that people had invented and were using. Elizabeth opened the alert and saw that it was a video that had already spread throughout Japan. Clack immediately looked up when he heard that it was his video. It had already gained 1.5 million views, this unexpected. The sudden surge in popularity had made life 10 times harder at the White Demon's house. Suddenly, Clack heard someone call his name, and was slightly surprised. It was a large rooster named Tatsuo, and next to him was a smaller rooster that Clack called Lucky. The rooster shouted upon hearing his nickname, insisting that his name was not Lucky, but Kokichi. Clack wondered if those guys would have followed him all the way here. Tatsuo had to deal with Clack, and if necessary, he would go to the other side of the world to do it. After all, if someone wasn't punished for what they had done, and although Tatsuo had a hard time finding him at first, he got lucky thanks to that popular video. He realized he was on the right track. The chickens in the background tensed, old man and the child. The monster hadn't anticipated such a thing and was left speechless. When it realized it had been struck by a rooster, Clack stared at it, letting it know that he would be the last thing it saw. Waiting for something to happen, Tatsuo menacingly asked Clack if he remembered the events of a year ago, the last time they had seen each other in the backyard near that beautiful, big house, which showed a boy sitting and holding a cute white hen named Sara. Clack's sister, Sara, turned to Clack and asked him why he wouldn't let her pet her, to which Clack, he simply looked at her and asked his sister not to hurt him, then walked away. She wanted to play with him, but Clack told her to leave him alone. She walked away and began to peck at the grass while his friend heard him yelling at his sister. Running out onto the road, he saw Tatsuo. Behind him was his lackey Kokichi, holding a kind of nail-like object near Sara's neck. Tatsuo confronted Clack for having abused his sister Mako. Clack, in turn, said that she had thrown herself at him. Tatsuo turned to Mako, and she said that she couldn't help it because Clack was her type. In any case, it didn't matter to him one way or another. He would find an excuse to fight Clack, even resorting to a vile act like taking a hostage to blackmail Clack. After all, in a fight, honestly, Tatsu didn't stand a chance, losing absolutely every fight he got into. So mentioned that, in fact, he had lost almost all of his fights, but nevertheless, he would use any means to defeat Clack. He ordered Clack not to defend himself, or Sara would be killed. After these words, Tatsu began to beat Clack. Sara yelled at him to stop, but Tatsuo, he didn't care. He started pecking at Clack, stomping on him, and hitting him relentlessly. Clack did not resist, and suddenly something strange began to happen to Sara. Some fire appeared around her. She defended herself from Kokichi and diverted Tatsu's attention. Taking advantage of the moment, Clack got up and hit the rooster, making him fall off of his body. Sara ran to her brother and cried, because she was very afraid for her life and this monster would see before dying, and that it would happen soon. The monster immediately forgot about its potential victims, stepped over them, and charged towards Clack. Clack recalled how, many years ago, the events flashed back to the days of the niche. Clack remembered that, right after this incident with Sara, a demon took her away. All year long, Tatsu had dreamed of getting revenge on Clack, and now his dreams would finally come true. Clack asked him what abomination Tatsu had invented this time, but Clack's reply was that he was very confident, as always, like, always. But what would they do when they saw this? Something started emerging from Tatsu's neck, which indicated that he was possessed by a demon. He asked Clack if he knew what happens when you feel total hatred for someone for too long. Everyone looked at him, horrified, and unable to believe what they were seeing. Then Tatsu answered that, when he felt hatred for Clack and wanted to kill him, over time it turned into love, and that hatred awakened something within Tatsu. Meanwhile, in the schoolyard, the principal was addressing the students, and, in his speech, he also made sure to express his gratitude to the chickens, as they feed the school and eat the weeds and bugs. But at that moment, everyone heard a loud crash in the yard. Soon, the school children saw a huge rooster was approaching them from behind the school. All the school children immediately started running, fleeing the yard, where they saw a man looking for the trio. He asked what was happening, and everyone shouted that there was a demon in the yard. He ran towards it, worried his rooster might also be there. Clack stood in front of the enormous copy, ordering Elizabeth and Pillow to not interfere, and they didn't care at all. The rooster behind the tree couldn't believe that Clack was going to fight the monster alone. Tatsuo turned to Clack, telling him that his love was so strong that it had created this demon in his honor. What would it be like to be killed by a huge copy of himself? He just looked at him and realized how far Tatsuo had gone, and that he had already is about to devour Yuki. His mother is helpless, tears streaming down her face, when a savior suddenly appears from out of nowhere. The rooster snatches the child from the demon's grasp. A similar monster had killed his sister, Sara. Back then, he was too weak to help her, which is why he swore to destroy every last monster. Clack dodged the monster's claws that turned into a demon to get revenge. He was willing to take any form to get revenge on Clack. He tried to crush Clack, but Clack managed to dodge the attack, jumping and landing on the roof. Tatsu then began pecking at the school roof in an attempt to grab Clack, but he failed because the rooster was too fast. And when he pecked for the last time, just as he thought, he had failed. Clack had escaped and was at the very tip of the peak. As soon as Tatsu saw him, Clack pecked him in the eye, causing the huge rooster to screech. Yoko cheered for Clack, and the young rooster couldn't believe that Clack was defeating such a monster. Meanwhile, the man behind the statue was filming them, waiting for new content that would make him popular. Tatsu was even more furious. He flapped his enormous wings, creating an incredibly strong gust of wind that knocked him over. Elizabeth and Pillow were standing next to each other and began to be dragged by the morninglarm wind. In the same way, the hen grabbed the chick and held onto the tire embedded next to her. The man with the camera decided to keep filming, even if the video cost him his life. Tatsu swung again, and the tiles splashed against the roofs of the houses. He turned to Clack, calling him pathetic since he couldn't even move a leg now. Clack, struggling to avoid being blown away, he admitted that he could barely move a feather at that moment, but that he could do better, use resonance to see who was stronger, and so he did. It was obvious that their forces were not equal, and Tatsu decided to hit even harder. Clack, with the last of his strength, forced himself to maintain the resonance for as long as possible and to exert himself to the utmost. To make it stronger, Tatsu realized that he had lost, and in a moment, the monster's huge head shattered into pieces. Elizabeth and Poloko were standing side by side. He was trying to grab him. Clack was quick enough that the monster couldn't catch him. Clack cleverly confused the monster, surrounding it from different sides so that it, rejoicing that Clack had won, and the young rooster was still standing behind the tree. Clack stated that the difference between the copy and the original is as great as the difference between heaven and hell. Tatsu was lying next to the huge rooster, clearly out of it. Kochi ran towards him. The man who was filming everything decided to check the footage, but to his surprise, to his dismay, the camera recorded nothing. The young rooster looked at Clack, but now with a different gaze, one of admiration. He had never really thought about his life before. He grew up in a very ordinary way, eating and drinking whatever that they gave him, and Clack was free and trusted his instincts. He was truly fearless and brave. Although they are both roosters, Clack is different, and that's what he aspires to be in the future. The rooster mustered his courage and called out to Clack, telling him that he wanted to be his apprentice, to which Clack, in his usual manner, and with his cold, impassive voice, said that he wouldn't even consider such a thing, and the three of them left, running from the chicken coop. Clack sat down in front of the slot machine. The slot machines were spinning, and he had won a bunch of coins again. He was already used to the slot machines, after an hour. Previously, they had been fleeing from pursuers who had surrounded and trapped them from all sides. Even so, the trio managed to break free and escape. They hid under a bridge, and Elizabeth, she took out her phone and saw that the video views were still increasing. She didn't understand why people were trying to catch them and take them to the circus. Pyoko realized that being popular is very difficult and dangerous, but they had no other option. Now they had to hide until things calmed down. Clack didn't like this idea. He had never hidden from anyone before, and he wasn't going to start now. He wanted to keep moving forward. Elizabeth called it suicide, since people all over town knew them, and a lot of people were after them. Clack honestly didn't understand why. He couldn't keep up with him. The monster couldn't tell which side Clack was on, now trying to catch the rooster he had often just defeated. Suddenly, Clack was right next to he suddenly had to hide from people. He is a free bird and chooses how he wants to live his life. Elizabeth yelled at him, saying it was a bad idea and that he was underestimating the danger of the situation. Clack stood firm, saying that he wouldn't tolerate orders and would do whatever he saw fit, and they started arguing. Elizabeth didn't understand why Clack was being so stubborn and wanted him to at least consider his actions. Clack called her hysterical and told her to stay away from him with her advice, and Pillow asked them to stay out of the fight. The rooster decided he'd had enough and was going to continue his journey. Only Pillow cried, begging him not to leave. Elizabeth tried to stop her, but the hen kept crying and pleading with the rooster not to abandon them. Clack was walking down the street. He was very angry and muttered that he was fed up with that annoying hen. Suddenly, a man with a net appeared behind him and tried to catch the rooster. Clack noticed him, broke the net, and scared the man away. He flew into a rage and shouted at everyone to leave him alone. The man fell back in surprise, and Clack told him not to mess with him. He was walking down the street and noticed a place with a lot of people, and Clark realized it was a place where people enjoyed having fun playing games. He decided to go inside, as he could use some relaxation. A lot of noise was coming from inside. Inside the establishment, there was the jingling of coins and the whirring of spinning slot machines. Clark observed everything and couldn't understand if people were actually having fun with all that noise. They obviously weren't healthy, yet they seemed to enjoy it. Suddenly, someone matched all the images on the screen, and the coins began to chime. Clark knew what was happening. People were winning money here. A man asked Clark if he wanted to try the same game. Clark reacted and glared menacingly at the man. He was a demon. Turning towards him, Clark noticed his fangs, his unusual ears, and his eyes. The demon realized that monster's eye, and as soon as it noticed him, the rooster pecked its eye, momentarily blinding the monster. Clack decided not to waste the moment to deliver one last blow. Clark was right about him. His name was Mario. Clark continued to stare menacingly at Mario and asked what someone like him was doing in this place, to which Mario replied that he wasn't interested in fighting, so he could relax. Clack didn't sense any aggression from Mario, which he found very strange. Mario offered Clack another game. He hesitated, and then coins poured out of the machine in a moment. The demon was already standing and watching the rooster achieve its first victory. Clack was surprised that he was already getting the hang of it, and Mario congratulated him. Suddenly, they approached the demon. It was a club employee who told him that animals were not allowed inside. They went outside, and the demon became agitated because he had arrived at the club with a coin he had picked up off the ground, and now he was there with a lot of money. Clack was amazed. He had won so much money with just a few coins. which meant that Mario could earn his own money and manage it properly. Clack really wanted the sea urchin, and Mario had doubts about whether it was the right thing to do, so he decided to go and get his money back. Clack hurried along, immediately, to stop him and change his mind. Yes, he might have picked up that coin in the street, and it might not have been his, but fate had granted him such good fortune, and now he had so much money, and had to accept such a gift from destiny. Mario was surprised, but the rooster reassured him that this was how everything worked, adding that he wanted to ask his new friend for something. A moment later, they had a package of sea urchins purchased from the store. Mario asked Clack if chickens ate sea urchins, to which the rooster responded with a trembling voice that it was his favorite food, and that he had been dreaming about it. He leaned over the food, pecked at it, and swallowed a little. But a second later, he vomited it all up again. He called them rotten, since the sea urchin. Taking in as much air as he could, Clack screamed at the monster with all his might. The force of his voice was so powerful that the old man and the boys covered their ears. The windows of the houses he had tasted on the beach was drastically different from this filth. He was very sad and couldn't contain his emotions, shouting in disappointment. Suddenly, he fell to the ground, and Mario tried to figure out what was wrong with him, but Clack was already unconscious. He woke up in another area and asked where he was. Mario told him that this is where he lives and that he had brought Clack here. While still unconscious, Clack mentioned owing him a favor and inquired if Mario lived here with anyone. Mario responded that he had been living here alone for a while, and that he sometimes goes to the city when he is bored, but he enjoys living here because it's quiet and he feels comfortable. Plus, it has a very nice view of the city, making it his favorite place. Clack cautiously asked Mario about the whereabouts of the man who had created him. The demon assumed that the man was already happy, and then Mario appeared. 6 months prior, the man had been told in the hospital that he had terminal stomach cancer, and that he had only 1 month left to live. The man sat in a snow-covered park and reflected on the peaceful 47 years he had lived. He began to cry upon realizing that he didn't have a girlfriend, or the family didn't want to die. They wanted to live. He repeated this several times while continuing to cry in despair. Suddenly, something began to emerge from him, transforming into a huge demon. The man was terrified by what he had done. The monster told him that it had appeared because of the man's desire to live, and that it would live until the end of his life so that he could take it easy. The man didn't quite understand how this was supposed to help him, but suddenly, the phone rang. It was the doctor, telling him that there had been a mistake, and that the man did not have cancer. He apologized, telling him that he had made a mistake and that he was perfectly healthy. The man felt incredibly relieved to be able to continue living, and shattered from the force of the sound. Strange things began to happen to the monster. It began to swell and finally burst. The only thing left of him were some huge fingers, and demon didn't know what to do now. He jumped up and ran out of the park, overjoyed and happy that he was okay, and now had many plans for the future. Mario was left alone in the park, had to live the life of a man, and now he had no purpose. He is a purposeless creature who was born by happy accident. He was depressed, and his body was shrinking day by day. Clack. He contradicted Mario by saying that there is no creature without purpose. Mario looked at him, and Clack continued, saying that the demon had to move on with his life, and then he would find meaning in life. Mario's eyes filled with tears at the rooster's words, and Clark, in turn, thought of his sister Sara. He really wished she was there, alive. Mario interrupted Clark's sadness, and Clark told him that he was a good guy, but the rooster did not agree with him. Then the demon remembered something, and went to his cabin, taking out a bottle of sake. Since it was an unusual day, he wanted a drink, and asked Clack if he wanted to join him. Clack thought about it for a while, and decided he could drink a little. Soon they were drinking and laughing. Drinking with a friend was better than drinking. Only Clack had never been drunk before. It was a new feeling, but he suddenly felt strange and pulled away. It was clear he had drunk too much, which startled Mario a little, but he quickly recovered. Feeling better, he decided to teach his new friend something. Clack performed the Poa dance, moving in different directions. Mario laughed at these strange movements. The new friends were having fun together. It was already night, and the sun was setting. Mario told Clack that he had never had as much fun as he had that night, and that he was incredibly happy to have met him. Clack was also happy to meet him. He had never met a demon like him. They said goodbye, hoping to see each other again someday. Clack continued on his way, and it would be wise to find giant legs. People couldn't believe what they were seeing. The rooster had just defeated a monster almost 20 times its size. The grandfather quickly explained the phenomenon to the boys. Place to spend the night. He briefly wondered where Elizabeth and Pillow might be, but he immediately pushed those thoughts aside because it was none of his concern. Suddenly, he heard a noise. A large number of birds flew from the forest into the sky, and a dangerous storm was brewing over the city. Elizabeth asked the titmouse what he was doing. They shouldn't waste a single minute. Find a place to spend the night. It was already pouring rain, and Pillow said it was too dark to see anything. He kept calling for Clack, which made the hen a little angry. Elizabeth ordered Pillow to pull himself together and told him not to worry about them and that he should just forget about her. Pillow kept saying that he wouldn't leave her and that he would continue looking for her. He asked Elizabeth why she stayed with them and was always hitting Clack for no reason, saying he just hated him. He called Elizabeth horrible and said that he hated her. Elizabeth stood under the rain, looking at the chicken. She didn't hear anything new from her. Suddenly, a girl with an umbrella appeared out of nowhere. She was surprised to see a hen and a chick here. It must be the mother and her baby. She leaned toward them, and upon seeing the jewels, Elizabeth was called very classy by her, and the chicken also had something interesting on its back. She noticed that they were all wet, so she covered them with an umbrella, took a handkerchief from her bag, and cleaned the chicken. The chicken was worried that they might catch a cold, and then she wondered if chickens could even catch colds anyway. The girl didn't understand what the chickens were doing there. Maybe they were lost, and she asked them if they wanted to go with her. It was an old house that had leaks in the roof, and there were basins all over the ground with water dripping into them. Pyoko was swimming in one of the water bowls, calling it a little pool, and Elizabeth was a little displeased. They followed the girl because she was nice, but this house, I suspected it was what people call resonance. Basically, this phenomenon occurs when the frequency of a voice matches the wave frequency of an object, causing it to be launched into the air. Looked like a barn. The girl brought her grandfather medicine, for which he thanked her. The girl's name was Misuzu. Suddenly, the girl heard another word of thanks. It was Elizabeth. She said to the girl, who knew how to use the telephone to talk to people, told him her name, and Pillow kept scolding Elizabeth because she introduced her without his permission. Misuzu was delighted with him. Chicken ingenuity. And Grandpa said the chickens had changed a lot since he was young. It was 8:30, and Misuzu brought some grains for Elizabeth and Pillow. They said it was very tasty, and they thanked her. The girl began to wash the dishes, and Elizabeth asked if anyone else lived with them. Misuzu answered that they lived alone, that her parents had died in a car accident, when she was little, and that her grandfather had taken her in. When she finished washing the dishes, she sat down to do her homework. Elizabeth asked if Misuzu liked to study, to which she responded affirmatively. Her dream is to be a doctor so she can treat her grandfather for free. Pyoko said that Misuzu was a noble girl and that she had everything she needed. Elizabeth didn't like them. Seeing Pillow's expressions, he decided to ask Misuzu about something he had read on the internet, which stated that the area was expecting record rainfall, that there was a river nearby, and that a flood was possible. An evacuation was necessary. The grandfather then chimed in, saying there was no need to worry, as he had lived in that town for 85 years and nothing like this had ever happened to them. There was no need to worry. The rain would stop soon. Elizabeth hoped he wasn't wrong. Meanwhile, the water level in the river kept rising, and the rain wouldn't let up. An alert sounded, warning of a citywide evacuation due to the impending flood. Everyone in the house was sleeping soundly, except for Elizabeth, who couldn't sleep. She remembered Pillow's words about hating her, and she recalled that but this case was simply shocking. They wondered who this rooster really was. Clark approached the dead monster and examined its neck. The monster that had killed his sister had a flaw. Beginning, she had sought out Clack for another reason. She remembered what he had told her about his instincts and what he said about his anger, not diminishing each day. But when she found him, no. She could kill him if she wanted to, but she couldn't bring herself to do it. She still had feelings for him, and she didn't understand why. Thunder rumbled outside. Misuzu woke up when someone knocked on the door. The girl opened the door, and the man. He asked if she hadn't heard the evacuation signal, explaining that the river had already reached the city. Everyone was startled. Indeed, the river had already overflowed its banks and was beginning to flood the streets. The man said that Misuzu's house was in a low-lying area and that the water would arrive soon, so they had to evacuate immediately. Misuzu grabbed her wheelchair and went to her grandfather to tell him about the flood. He listened, thought for a moment, and said he wasn't going anywhere, which surprised the three of them. He reasoned that he was too weak and would only be a burden to everyone. Then Misuzu began to reason with him, not wanting her grandfather to die there. He remained firm, telling her that she was a very good granddaughter and basically a good girl, but that regardless, he would die soon, grateful to life for having lived 85 years, which he felt was enough. Misuzu cried and begged him not to say such things and to come with her, but her grandfather, on the contrary, he urged her to leave the house as soon as possible. Misuzu refused to go anywhere without him. Suddenly, someone said that if the old man wanted to die like that, he was welcome to do so. It was Elizabeth, speaking on the phone. She continued, saying that now was not the time, because if he dies, what will become of Misuzu? The girl is trying so hard to help her grandfather. How can he leave her alone in this world and hurt her like this now? Even though he is the only family member she has left. Silence fell over the house. Grandpa looked at Misuzu and smiled, remarking that he never thought he would be scolded by a chicken, and so they hurried through the downpour. Mark on its neck that resembled a small letter E. It wasn't the monster Clark was looking for. The carnage had caused a great commotion, especially since pieces of the monster were towards the nearest shelter. Misuzu was pushing Grandpa in the stroller, and they saw that the shelter was right next door. She tells her grandfather to be patient, assuring him that they are about to arrive when, suddenly, he hears a crash. It was a huge wave of water erupting from the shore and heading straight towards them. Isabel yelled at Misuzu to quickly get up the hill, but the stroller's wheel broke. It was stuck in a hole, and there was no way to get it up the hill. The water was getting closer, and Misuzu already thought it was the end, but Elizabeth, with all her strength, began to push the stroller. With the girl, this is not the end, she thought. She looked at her and began to realize that, even if they didn't agree, the chicken had always saved her. She had no reason to love Pillow, but she cared about her. Even now, she was risking her life for these people. Once, she told them that there is a lot of misery in the world, and that living is not easy at all. Pillow realized that Elizabeth is the kind of chicken who goes out of her way to help everyone. Elizabeth is the personification of justice. The chicken immediately began to help her friends. Pushing the baby stroller with all their might, they worked together to move it, noticing the water was about to reach them. The grandfather told them to leave it and run, saying there was nothing they could do, but Misuzu would never do that. At the very last moment, they managed to move the baby carriage up the hill, and the water immediately flooded the spot where they had been standing just a second before. They sat in the shelter, and Misuzu thanked Pyoko and Elizabeth for saving Grandpa. The grandfather also thanked them. Pyoko said that now Grandpa couldn't die until Misuzu grew up, but people didn't understand her. To them, it was just a funny little thing that squeaked in the girl's hand. Elizabeth thought they wouldn't have made it without the chicken demon before it could reach its mouth, and carries him to safety on a rooftop. Enraged that the demons always get away with their actions, he warns that each of them will lose their actions, scattered, literally, all over the place. Grandpa's garden was also severely damaged. Clark picked up a broomstick with his beak and poked the old man's leg with it, indicating that he wanted to help. But where did he get his strength from? Meanwhile, from his vantage point on the hill, Mario watched the town flooding. It was the first time he had seen a storm like that, and he hoped Clack was okay. Suddenly, he heard vibrations, touched the ground, and felt a sense of foreboding. He listened intently and was shocked by what he heard. It was horrible. The dam was on the verge of collapsing due to the massive amount of water. He didn't know what to do because the reservoir's water would rush towards the city, and since it was surrounded by mountains, it would simply be submerged. Amidst this downpour, the same man gave turns. He hadn't lost hope of finding a rooster and was very upset, but he figured the hens couldn't have gone far, especially with this weather. He would find them, no matter the cost. It would cost him, and he would film them again. To do this, he needed to find at least one chicken from the trio. He would not forgive the humiliation he had suffered 3 months prior. Ibokura was sitting in his office when his companions approached him and asked if he had anything to tell them. Ibokura pretended not to know what they were talking about. They were very angry with him because he hadn't managed to plan the Christmas party and had to do the work for him at the last minute, and he didn't even thank them afterward. In response, Ibura nonchalantly drank his tea and said that they did it of his own free will, and that he owed them absolutely nothing. The boys were scandalized by such insolence, thinking that he was mocking them, to which Ibura retorted that he hadn't done any such thing. That, the man who overheard the conversation told them not to mess with Ibura, and continued, saying that he wasn't a decent guy, that he had too much unjustified arrogance, and that he performed his work poorly. A colleague who was passing by confirmed that he doesn't even contact this Ibura because he is completely incompetent, and dealing with him can negatively affect a person in the worst way. Clean it all up. Clack, Grandpa, and the children got to work, putting in a lot of time and energy, but when they looked back, after finishing the cleanup, the rooster was gone. And then everyone present agreed that Ibura was only there for the salary, even though he did an absolutely shoddy job. That was engraved in his mind. He would never forget the shame. He wanted to prove to everyone that he wasn't a loser, and when he became a famous YouTuber, everyone would understand. What he had to do was find those stupid chickens and record them. Mario ran as fast as he could in the rain along the road that wasn't flooded yet. He arrived there and saw that the The dam could collapse at any moment. There were already cracks in it. Then Mario pulled himself together and began to grow into an even bigger demon than he was when he was born. Meanwhile, the shelter was already full of people. Misuzu was sitting next to Grandpa, along with Elizabeth and Pillow. Grandpa was already feeling much better, but Pillow was getting discouraged. He kept thinking about Clack, wondering where he was and if he was okay. Elizabeth also wondered about him, questioning if he had really gone on a trip and been able to leave them behind. A man entered the eye. Sala asked everyone to remain calm and listen to what he had to say. He stated that they had already calculated the rainfall in the city to be around 100 centimeters, and that the dam was on the verge of about to collapse. Everyone looked at the man in fear. Elizabeth explained to a frightened Pio that this was imminent because the reservoir would soon be overflowing. The people were in disbelief. They were shocked. One man commented that it reminded him of a story where it was rumored that this dam was being constructed poorly and with a limited budget. People were angry at what they had heard, blaming the government, but one way or another, there was nothing they could do about it. The man continued, saying that they had been instructed not to leave the shelter, but that if his mission in this town was over, and as a free and adventurous seeker, he decided to head to the next town, hoping he had done enough to repay the old man's kindness. Dam were to collapse, it would flood the entire city, including their current shelter. A woman anxiously inquired when it would be possible to evacuate the city, but the man beside her responded that, if the weather continued like this, evacuation would be impossible, leaving the people trapped and unsure of what to do. Just then, Elizabeth pulled out her phone and began searching for any possible routes to reach the dam, hoping that not all roads were flooded and that they could still find a way through. Poloko didn't understand what Elizabeth was doing, or if she even had a plan, but he decided to go along with it. Meanwhile, Ibaka was driving around town, still hoping to catch the chickens, when he suddenly spotted Elizabeth with Poloko. She was running as fast as she could. Ibaka didn't see any roosters around, but regardless, there was no time for hesitation. He couldn't afford to lose sight of them. There was already a traffic jam at the edge of town, and they were in a hurry to escape because the dam was on the verge of collapsing. Elizabeth took off running, and behind her was a pursuer who didn't understand where she was going. Poloko saw the dam, but his attention quickly shifted to an enormous demon that was holding it together. Elizabeth couldn't believe her eyes. The demon was trying to save the city. Ibakura was ecstatic. Now he was going to film the collapse of the dam, with the demon holding it back. Ibakura had hit the jackpot and was now sure to become popular. He took out his clipboard and started live streaming what was happening. Meanwhile, at the shelter, Misuzu couldn't find Elizabeth and the chicken, and she was worried about them. Suddenly, a man standing nearby announced to the entire room, so everyone could see, the demon is holding the dam. The people turned on the large television and saw a huge monster holding a dam that was about to burst, using his last strength. People were excited by what they saw and began to kindness. With that, the demon had been defeated, and the mess was cleaned up, so he could leave in search of new adventures with peace of mind. But suddenly, Clack remembered the hen. Encouraged Mario, telling him to hold on and not give up. Misuzu saw her missing friends on the screen and didn't understand what they were doing there or how they had gotten there. Meanwhile, Ibakura was filming. Everything that happened at the reservoir made him admire the demon's work. The public kept arriving, everyone focused on what was happening. Mario saw the chickens in Ibaka and warned them, "This is dangerous." The place was dangerous, and they had to flee immediately. Elizabeth asked why the demon was doing this, and Mario replied that he simply wanted to save everyone in the town. They were surprised too, hearing that answer. The dam began to collapse, with water gushing from the cracks. Mario remembered Clack's words about the need to live, and that he would then find his purpose in life. So, he found that purpose. He had always wanted to be useful, and now he couldn't be ashamed of himself. He realized that this was what he was born for, to save innocent people, even at the cost of his own life, and he would do it. He told them once again to leave because this was very dangerous. It was the first time Pyoko had ever seen a demon like that. Elizabeth had read about such demons in internet, but I didn't know they still existed. He remembered that he wanted to destroy all the demons, but now he hesitated. Pyoko called her over to look at someone. He's human, but what is he doing here? Bakura looked at the demon with surprised eyes. He didn't understand why he was risking his life for humans. He would never do that. He reminded himself of his youth, when he decided to tell his mother that he wanted to be a lawyer. When she asked him why, he said that he wanted to help people in need. He studied hard, but never got into university because he failed the entrance exams, instead blaming his mother for his failure. He realized that he had always blamed those around him for his problems and had never taken responsibility. but deep down, he knew that the only one to blame for the hen from which he hadn't parted kindly, and who wouldn't let him sleep. He decided he had to go see her and offer an explanation. However, already in front of her house, Clack realized that she wasn't alone. Problems was himself, he just never wanted to admit it. He saw the chicken standing in front of him. Elizabeth was telling him to run, but suddenly Ibakura felt a crack starting to spread. Under his foot, a moment later, his foot gave way. And Bakura was falling from a great height. Nobody had expected such a thing. As he fell, Bakura screamed that he didn't want to die. He must have realized. He realized everything he had done wrong in his life. He was about to fall when, out of nowhere, someone appeared and lifted him up, preventing him from crashing. Everyone gaped as Bakura was rescued at the last moment. It was Clack. He had returned. He was back with his friends. They truly thought he had abandoned them forever, but they were overjoyed to see him. Bakura was awake and realized that he had just been saved by the rooster he had been hunting for days. Mario, for his part, asked Clack if he was also worried about the state of the dam, to which Clack answered in a serious tone that he was only thinking about how Mario was holding the ground together, preventing this disaster. Mario said that he was protecting all the residents with his efforts, and now, thanks to that, after everything, who has finally passed and has a reason to live, Clack admitted that if he hadn't contained the dam, there would have already been many casualties. Mario is a true hero. The demon was embarrassed by what he had heard, so many kind words about him. He doesn't act to be a hero, but because he wants to help, and that is Mario. Suddenly, new holes began to appear in the dam from which water gushed out, and Bakura stood up and started running towards the stairs. Mario held onto the dam until the last moment, but realized that he couldn't hold on any longer. At that moment, the dam collapsed. The water gushed right above him and knocked him over. Everyone screamed in horror because they hadn't seen Mario. He was completely covered by water. Clack looked towards the water. Home. He decided not to get involved and left quickly, heading to the new city. The girl stood on tiptoe, looking adoringly at the rooster on the rock in front of her. Yes, Clack, knowing that his friend was somewhere in it. The foundations beneath their feet began to crumble, and they hurried away from there. Clack told Elizabeth that they needed to find a place, sure that he would try to stop the flood. Iwakura went up and, seeing the magnitude of the disaster, took out his camera to film it. The people who were in the shelter, watching the broadcast, they couldn't believe what was happening. They were very scared, and some even started praying. The children were hugging their parents, and Misuzu couldn't believe that they were all going to die now. Iwakura saw Kak and Elizabeth running, and decided to follow them in case they had a plan. Meanwhile, Mario was drowning. He knew he was doing what he could, and hoped he could help at least someone. Mentally, he thanked Clack for helping him believe in himself and his powers, and he was glad to have been born. With those words, he disappeared into the depths. Clack was in a hurry and ran along the path, getting ahead of the water current. He thought about Mario. Surely Clack wouldn't do something like that, but for Mario's sake, he would try and go all the way. He jumped over the preceded. The rocks were there, and the water was about to reach them. Bakura took out his camera and started filming. The people in the shelter watched the rooster stopping the water with the power of its voice. People recognized this rooster as the same one they had seen on YouTube a few days prior. So, he had been fighting a demon, and now he wanted to stop the flood. He wanted to try to save them. That gave hope to the people, and their attention turned to the screen. The girl wondered if perhaps he was Elizabeth's friend. With the help of Clack's resonance, they managed to fill the path with stones, and were able to stop the water. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief, but not for long. The water broke through the barrier and continued pouring in. The people were scared. Clack hadn't succeeded, but he kept running. Yes, it was a small barrier, so he is at the zoo with his usual, serious and arrogant expression. He looked at the girl. The girl calls her brother to look at the rooster, but the boy tells her that it could be some kind of bird from the south because he needed to find something else, something stronger. And suddenly, he realized what he had to do. He found an even bigger rock and started trying to knock it down. Elizabeth watched and did not. He understood what he was doing. He didn't think it would work. The water was already in the city. But after looking closer, he understood what Clack wanted. This rock would completely block the water's path to the city. But would he make it in time? This rock was too big. The water was almost there, and stones from the rock were hitting Clack, distracting him. He mustered his courage and tried with his last strength to move that mountain. The rocks continued to hit him all over his body, but everyone, including Elizabeth, Pyoko, the people of the refuge, and even Bakuro, believed that Clark would succeed. Elizabeth remembered the day they had met, when he had saved them from a demon for no reason. He already seemed like the type of person who would try to help even if it wasn't in his power. She understood now, and that was why she still loved him after all. And then, the rock began to fall. Everyone saw it fall into the water, blocking. Its passage toward the city wasn't completely covering everything in some areas, so Clack decided to watch it pass while destroying more rock beneath the block. As he did this, the block fell, causing a wave of water rushed over Clack. Everyone watched in horror as he disappeared completely, calling out his name repeatedly. The people in the shelter watched the screen, unable to believe that this hero had died. Pillow cried, realizing what had happened, but Elizabeth noticed something strange in the water. Just then, Clack emerged from the water, saved by the voice. Everyone looked at him with admiration. He had been able to finish the job by stopping the water. The rock now completely blocked the path to the city. Clack stood up and surveyed the work he had done. The water no longer posed a threat to anyone. Everyone exhaled in relief. Normal Rooster has no reason to be in the zoo. He starts throwing peanuts at Clack, finding it funny. Clack caught each peanut with his beak at high speed. The boy was surprised. He had achieved it. He was tired and a little angry. How could they have built such an unreliable and fragile dam? His entire hairstyle had been ruined because of that water. Gallo, exhausted, fell to the ground. He was breathing heavily, but at least he was alive. Clack, he had finally achieved it. He had fulfilled what Mario believed was the purpose of his life. The people followed, looking at the stream, and they were very surprised by what they had learned. They began to rejoice, for they had been saved. El Gallo had achieved it, and now they would live. They hugged their children and wanted to go celebrate. Others gave thanks to God, or rather, to the saints. Birds came out and continued to rejoice that San the rooster had survived, and the boys with the nets also went away, praising the Savior. They remembered how they wanted to catch him, and were glad that he was good, and that they hadn't succeeded. Then the girl was still in the house with the happy people, and looked out the ply window. She looked at the sky, and began to thank Elizabeth, Chicken, and White Rooster for saving him. Misuzu thought that she would become a great and kind doctor, and save many people like they wished the chickens good luck. Elizabeth and Pillow quickly jumped towards Clack, who was lying on the ground. The hen called out to the rooster while crying, hugged him, and began to kiss him, saying that he was great and that she loved him, while Elizabeth stayed behind, surprised by what was happening. She turned to Pillow and asked if she was going too far with the kisses, and the chick replied that there was nothing wrong with kissing her husband. Elizabeth started laughing because she called Clack her husband, and said that she was the only one who thought that way. Pillow glared menacingly at the hen so that she would stop laughing and asked what she meant. Elizabeth, who had fallen in love with the rooster, was frightened by such a question. The hen asked if she was right, but the hen dismissed it as nonsense. But Clack was not amused. He shot the peanuts back at him, giving him a lifelong lesson not to mess with him again. Clack, with the same imperturbable face, turned around, and she turned around so as not to show her excitement. He was surprised by such frankness on the part of that girl. Elizabeth wanted to evade the question, but Pillow pressed her, and she realized that she had such a strange reaction. He asked her to stop lying, but she denied everything. Meanwhile, the rooster had already woken up, and the YouTuber was watching them. He was talking to his mom by phone. She said there was a terrible storm, but the man said he was fine and would be back soon. The mother asked her son about the YouTuber, but the man said he was dangerous to keep driving with. Now he wanted to try something else. He wants to continue his journey and face his weaknesses. He wants to become stronger. He assured his mother that he was fine and that he would be more independent. He then said he would call again and disconnected the call. The man thought that this rooster had made him change, that he wanted to become someone capable of protecting people like him. This rooster and demon had opened his eyes. Now he could sincerely say, "Thank you." The rooster called Key, told him that he doesn't care about anything except revenge for his sister. And then, he asked what he was doing there, which made Gallo think. An hour earlier, it had been raining. Clack was sitting at the bus stop, lost in thought. He had a bad feeling, but his thoughts were interrupted by people's screams. They were running and shouting that they had to go faster because the dam was about to burst. Clack started to repeat his words, surprised by the news. He remembered leaving Elizabeth and Poloco behind, abandoning them, but then he realized he didn't have time to look for them. He would help everyone. Avoid the disaster first. And with those words, Clack ran forward. Now we return to the present, where Kiggy was still pondering his question. Then Kiggy said he was just passing by, but Elizabeth said, walked away thinking that he couldn't stand children, and that he couldn't understand how they went around without the supervision of their elders, doing absolutely whatever they wanted. The birds of the south, there was no way he could lie. Clack turned around sharply and thought he was looking at the same rock he had thrown to block the water and save the people. Pillow's eyes welled up with, he cries as he remembers how kind that demon was. Polito told Clack that he would destroy all demons, but he didn't because there are demons like Mario. The rooster looked up at the sky and closed his eyes. He remembered how they met, how they had fun, and the things they did together. What he liked most was the moment they drank sake together. For Clack, sharing a drink with him was the best thing, and he said goodbye to Mario. Meanwhile, there was a man lying on the opposite shore. It was Mario himself. The demon had survived, but he lay there unconscious. He tried to get up, but he was very tired and found it difficult to do so. Mario started laughing, not understanding at all what had happened. He smiled and looked at his hands. The demon was happy to still be alive. He repeated again that he was alive, and then he raised his hands to the sky and started laughing and shouting, wanting everyone to look at him because he was alive. He couldn't believe that he had survived. But then, the joy of his face abruptly fell as he looked towards the river. He stared at the calm water, not understanding why it had stopped flowing. He stood in silence, gazing at the water, and then he remembered and shouted the name of the rooster. He started running, saying as he did that he knew Key wasn't an easy rooster to deal with. From the first time they met, he was incredibly handsome. Meanwhile, our heroes walked down the path with sad faces. But then, hey, the rooster turned around and saw a silhouette waving its arms. It was Mario, who was calling out to Key. Everyone was left speechless when they saw the good demon, safe and sound, and saved. And then the rooster smiled and said, "That son of a is alive." Mario couldn't stop waving his arms and thanking Clack for stopping the flood for him. He called the rooster over to mind as the rooster charges towards the demon. The scene transitions with the words, "This is the story of a rooster who saves humanity." Approximately 1 year prior to these events, our hero were gathering nearby, and their behavior disgusted Clack. That way of life pisses him off. That whole carefree world pisses him off. Immediately, other birds approached him and visit him, promising to treat him to a fresh sea urchin. Clack smiled and offered the demon another drink together. He raised his wing in farewell, and our heroes departed in search of new adventures. Mario stared at them, tears welling up in his eyes. He was upset that they had left, but then something made Mario turn around. It was a girl with black hair and a black suit with black shoes. She stood in front of him and looked at the demon without any emotion, and he looked at her with fear or surprise and, out of decency, decided to greet her. The girl stretched out her hand and raised her index finger, which after a moment began to transform into a sharp-tipped weapon, and suddenly, with lightning speed, the girl plunged that finger into Mario's forehead. The girl pulled out the weapon from the demon's head, his eyes rolled back, and he fell to the ground. Meanwhile, we are shown Key's past, where he lived peacefully with his master and Sara. He and Sara would go together to the garden for a walk, as their owner instructed, so as not to wander too far. Sara suggested Key play hide and seek, which the rooster thought was silly, but the hen kept asking him, and he realized he had no choice. After a while, the rooster finished counting and went to look for Sara. He glanced to the side and became thoughtful. He spotted a rock behind which he could see something that, it looked like a tail. He even found it amusing that she was so bad at hiding. He circled around the other side of the rock and began to sneak up behind it, lunging at her, shouting that he had caught her. The chicken was very startled, but still managed to attack him with fire. Clack! He caught fire, started screaming and running, but the chicken didn't realize how he had done it. He kept running, and when he reached the water, he dove in. He began to choke and scream, but the owner was nearby and immediately ran to his aid. He asked him if he was. They offered to play with him, but he just gave them an annoyed look and started to walk away. However, the birds wouldn't take no for an answer and threw Clack into the water and started to splash him. Okay. And Sara looked at her brother with fear, unsure of what to do. After a while, the rooster was sitting on the grass, completely exhausted and bandaged up, and beside him was a distraught Sara, crying. She apologized, expressing her regret for what she had done to him, but Key told her that the flames weren't that serious, so she shouldn't worry too much because he also believed it was your fault. Sara lowered her head, her eyes brimming with tears. She thought she was sick and couldn't understand why fire was erupting from her body, just like before. What the hell was all of that? Sara started crying and asking what was happening to her. She threw herself into Clack's arms, crying and terrified, utterly terrified. Clack wanted to say something, but he couldn't find the right words, and she simply hugged her sister and told her that her brother would always protect her and that she shouldn't be afraid. We are then transported to a scene where the houses are burning, the entire city is engulfed in flames, A huge finger flicked Clack away, sending him flying towards the stone. An enormous hand reached through the flames and grabbed Sara. She called out to him, needing help, but there was nothing she could do. Anyone who could do something should have acted, but there was fire everywhere, and the enormous demon was already dragging its prey toward its jaws. She screamed, and Clack screamed back, because there was nothing else he could do. We are now transported to Clack's memory, where he gets up and sees his brother standing in a pool of blood. He turns to his brother, but his brother only looks surprised to see him and doesn't find the right words. Sara asked him why he hadn't saved her. He had promised her that he would always protect her. Clack looked at her dumbfounded, not knowing what to say, but then we see that the chickens are asleep. The rooster woke up in a cold sweat and said he was having the same dream again, so he stayed awake thinking about his sister all night. A new day arrived. They splashed him until they heard a cry for help. It was Clack's cry. He didn't know how to swim and was already drowning. The birds pulled Clack out of the water and apologized. He was still regaining consciousness, and now, the rooster walked through the park and looked for a suitable place. He began to dig with his paws and beak, and then sat down and began fluffing the soil with his wings. Kigi lay down and exhaled a sigh of relief. Relief, probably because he had been awake all night, but his peace was disturbed by Pillow, who ran up to the rooster and suggested playing in the dirt, then dropped into the mud. With all his might, he began to laugh. The hen said that Ki wasn't playing, but taking a mud bath. Elizabeth went on to say that mud baths help eliminate parasites and feather fleas. You could even say that it's a healthy habit, like human baths, but she wasn't going to take such a primitive shower, so she took and brewed insecticide out of her backpack. She began to spray herself with it and said that a maiden should groom herself elegantly, and the rooster and hen looked at her in amazement. Two pigeons approached them and recognized Clack as the same rooster that had fought alongside the demonic beast. They admired him, saying that it was great to have met him, and the hen was amazed at how they recognized the hero. He said they'd been seen on a human mobile phone, and were now very famous among the pigeons, and the other one stared at Ki with her mouth hanging open. Now he was convinced it was real and awesome. The rooster just said, okay, that he had nothing to say to them. And then the male pigeon told his sister to immediately ask the hero about the same thing, but the female pigeon said that it was impossible, and she didn't want to hear any excuses. He told her to shut her beak and listen to him, but the rooster approached, and the female pigeon had no choice. She was very worried, but she still made up her mind and asked if Clack wanted to go out with her, which greatly surprised Isabel. The girl listened to the hen and said that Clack became a superstar in the pigeon circle, but he was very angry with the stupid birds. Suddenly, an old toucan named Sina intervened in their conversation and quickly dispersed the other birds. To Elizabeth, these words were surprising. She wouldn't call it that. The hen wondered what the female dove meant, that she had what exists between a man and a woman, and described the dove loved the rooster, but she didn't say it out loud. Embarrassed, the dove continued talking, saying that she actually had a boyfriend, but she couldn't stay because she had to work as a carrier pigeon. And then, he asked him if he would like to take her place. The rooster was surprised. To be honest, he wasn't really interested in pigeons, but the dove insisted and said he wouldn't regret it. It continued, saying that if he accompanied them, she promised that he would have fun. His brother added that there were many admirers who would love to talk to a hero, so he asked him to think about it. But then, Elizabeth ran over and said she didn't think Kai liked her being there, and asked him to leave. The rooster said they insisted, and then he said he agreed. At that moment, Clack wanted to set conditions, but words of joy and gratitude interrupted him. After a while, the table was set, but the first date was quite crowded, because there were 5 doves and a rooster, and they came. Elizabeth and Pillow arrived, but the pigeons didn't like their arrival either. They said that expectations were already worse than ever, and the third pigeon added that the date was already ruined. The rooster looked at the female pigeon in surprise. Everything was too different from what he had been promised, but the girl herself didn't like it either. Not everything had gone as planned, and her brother. He tried to salvage the situation. He asked the pigeons if they knew this rooster, telling them that he was the same bird who fights monsters and that he was a true hero. But one of the pigeons, he said it was the first time he had ever heard of him. The pigeons began to argue about Clack's flaws. One said that roosters and chickens have wings, but they cannot fly. Another, scolding them for entertaining zoo visitors. They dispersed. Their chatter revealed that they had little respect for Sina, but they were afraid of him. The old pelican asked Clack if she said they always go Kio, 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 as if they were ordering a Coke, and a third added that the worst thing was the waddle swinging on his chin, and this made Ki very angry, but she restrained herself. Paloko, on the other hand, couldn't handle so much criticism, so she ran and yelled at the pigeons to stop making fun of her rooster, and began cursing. But the hen grabbed her and told her to calm down because Key could fix it alone. Although Elizabeth admits that they are insulting their race, which makes her angry, Poloko confirms this. The rooster thought he would beat them to death, but the hen said there shouldn't be violence. She clarified that violence would ruin the date for the chicks and that they should just socialize. Elizabeth suggested another way to resolve the conflict, saying that he should show them how wonderful roosters and hens can be, and if he succeeded, they would win. Clack thought about it for a moment, and then said that he understood, and that now all the responsibility would fall on his shoulders. He nodded and said okay, that he could do it, that it would be a battle or a date for his race. He raised his head proudly, ready with the words that would make them fall in love with him. Because with his charm, it wouldn't be difficult, and he made his way to the pigeons. Elizabeth and Poloko admired Key. The chicken even jumped for joy and shouted words of encouragement. The hen still had a bad feeling, but she hoped everything would turn out well. The rooster approached the table, and the performance began. First, our chicks introduced themselves. The female is called Shamo, and her partner is called Marcio Prizer. Then the other pigeons introduced themselves. To the right and left were two females whose names are Laura and Anna, and in the center was Seiko. But, suddenly, a rooster climbed onto the table, surprising the audience. He proudly climbed onto the table, spread his wings, tensed his muscles, and shouted that his name was Killy. Then he turned around, and was all right, and Clack thanked him for his help. At that moment, a zookeeper passed by. A few days prior, Clack had been found soaked and unconscious in front of the zoo gate by some birds who had caught him. Went to enjoy the food. Poloko also got up on the table and said, "How cool is the rooster?" But the pigeons didn't like this gesture very much. They said it was in bad taste and called him a cretin. Idiot, he suspected it would be like that. And the rooster abruptly turned around and began to fret. A couple of hours later, they were still sitting at the table, continuing their conversation. Anna was admiring Marcio's stories and asked him what it was like to participate in pigeon races. The boy told him that pigeons had an instinct that allowed them to fly thousands of kilometers, but they always found their way back, and Key simply listened. Then a chicken approached him and whispered that it was time for him to make himself known. Clack told the pigeons that the roosters also calculate gas and make horoscopes in Chinese, but the pigeons didn't know what he was talking about, and the hen whispered to the rooster in horror to try something else, and the rooster began to sweat from emotion. Then he said that they got up early, but the hen said that wasn't it. Then he said that the big comb was popular with the ladies, but that wasn't it either. Then he said that on the 28th of every month, it was Hen's Day, but then the hen couldn't take it anymore. She started yelling at him to stop, calling him stupid and saying he was a disgrace to their kind, and the rooster burned with shame. And then, he got angry and, with the words "to hell with this shit," he gave up. The rooster flew towards the table and broke it with a loud crack. He calmed down, but Poloko and Elizabeth stared in surprise, and the pigeons trembled in fear. The rooster began to say that he didn't care what anyone thought about roosters and hens, that he wasn't ashamed of who he was and how he lived, and that was the only thing that mattered to him before turning around. He turned around and said that he follows what he believes in and nothing else matters to him. The pigeons looked at him in amazement and then began to look at him with adoring eyes, exclaiming, "How brave he is," and that surprised. They picked up Clack and took him out for dinner, bringing him to a safe and secluded resting place where even the zookeepers wouldn't see him. Clack told Sina that he had been patrolling the outskirts. Our heroes. The pigeons began to shower Key with compliments. One said she had never seen a man with such conviction. Another said she had always been looking for a guy like him. And the third, he added that it was even more beautiful up close. Apparently, the rooster realized that this was a real catch. The pigeons surrounded the rooster. One proposed intimacy, and the others asked him who he would choose. And they said that he should marry one of them, which Pillow didn't like very much because the rooster was her husband. Elizabeth watched everything, upset. Clack, overcome with emotion, couldn't say anything, just twisted her head as they kept asking him to try them all and choose someone. The rooster laughed ridiculously, and the hen got angry and said that the rooster was a womanizer, which scandalized Clack. Proudly, she raised her head and left, and the rooster didn't understand why she was acting that way towards him. The pigeons got angry and started to leave too, saying that he was disgusting and calling the rooster trash. Marcio and Shaman approached Key, and he said it was bad, and the female said he had disappointed her, and they flew away, and Clack watched them sadly for a long time. Time passed, and the sun began to set over the park as our heroes rested on a bench. Elizabeth bowed her head, feeling regretful, and asked to be excused. The rooster understood, and he said that nothing was wrong. After all, it was just a gang of pigeons, but the hen didn't listen to his words and wondered why she had done that. Pillow jumped off the bench and started to campaigning, yell at Elizabeth, saying he wouldn't forgive her next time. Then the hen stumbled and began to fall off the bench, but someone's hands, likely human, caught her. The chicken and the rooster looked up and saw a girl with black hair, dressed in a black suit. She put Pillow on a bench and told them to watch her better next time. Then from the city, because he smelled the monster's presence. When it started to rain, he lowered his head and told Sina that he owed her a confession. He had eaten the hairy caterpillar the other night, and probably realized that this is the same girl who killed the demon hero named March. The girl left, and our heroes watched her, not just staring, but with distrust, and we are transported to a city where a powerful rooster, bleeding and breathing hard, is facing off against some demons and mutants. And then we see that near him is a horned demon with tentacle-like legs, and Dollaration, a scorpion demon with claws and a tail, and right behind them are two men. One has his arm fused with a gun, which he's using to aim at the rooster, and the second, a mutant guy, has kidnapped another rooster. The man laughed and pointed the minigun at the rooster, asking him what he was going to do now. The rooster, told his son to get out of there, but the other rooster didn't want to leave, his father in trouble. But he still made up his mind, turned around, and started running at full speed, which greatly surprised the men. Don't let that rooster get away. The man ordered the demons to attack and go after him, but a guy stopped them. He said they already have a hostage, so he'll be back. The rooster ran at lightning speed through the forests and cities without looking back. He kept thinking that he would definitely return for his father, and that he should just wait. Then, we shift to our heroes, who were resting outside the city, somewhere near the Paloco River. He approached Elizabeth and asked what she was doing. Elizabeth replied that she was preparing dinner. Pyoko saw a fish lying on the leaves and screamed with joy, already knowing what kind of fish it was. He remembered his father and said that it was the fish he carried on his back. Elizabeth said the fish was called a carp, and Clack asked her if she had gone fishing. Elizabeth said that she went to the river, and when he saw the carp in the water, he shocked it with his weapon and asked if it was fresh. Then, he grabbed the spices and said that now they had to season it with salt and pepper, and the dish would be ready. It was white fish. Thanks to it, the breakfast had helped his well-being, since Clack had just woken up after 3 days. Sina simply joked that the caterpillar wasn't bad food, and that the only thing she knowed, fried with a sauce of 2 brightly colored wildflowers and dandelions, which was divided into 3 portions. Paloco was happy and said that he loved fish. Clack then asked. They reluctantly let them eat it, and the hen also said, reluctantly, that she was actually a great cook. The rooster leaned down and sniffed the food. It didn't seem very tasty, but then he pecked at a short bit, closed his eyes, opened them, and they shone. It was delicious. He realized how a sauce full of weeds could be so good, taking the flavor of the white meat to the highest level. A flavor similar to that which comes from eating several grasshoppers at the same time, but it felt much better than that taste. Kig opened his mouth, and Bo looked at the food with loving eyes. Elizabeth laughed and said she was a chef and offered to start eating, but then, clack, he abruptly stopped her. He was looking at the food bite by bite, and the chicken and Paloco didn't understand what he was looking for. Kig continued, looking at the pieces of fish, and then he said that his piece was smaller than theirs. Elizabeth screamed because he was doing the same thing to everyone, but the rooster leaned over the same pieces, and he kept comparing, pointing out that he still had slightly less. Elizabeth screamed, saying he was pissing her off. He continued to complain, and the rooster was grateful that she spoke her mind. He started trying to more. He sneaked up and reached for a piece of chicken with his paw, but she grabbed his snout and told him to stop that instant. She squeezed his face with her paw and told him it was her food, and Paloco began to worry about him. Her husband. She smiled and told him that she wasn't hungry, and that, if he wanted, he could eat her portion. Clack reacted like lightning, said good, and quickly stuffed the hen's food into his beak and swallowed it. He swallowed it whole, and the hen didn't even have time to say a word. She opened her beak, and her eyes widened in surprise. Then Elizabeth started hitting Key with her paws, calling him an imbecile, and asking him how he could offer Clack were Brazilian grasshoppers. Clack couldn't accept such a valuable gift, so he refused it. Sena was impressed, but not too upset because she dared to steal the chicken's food. The rooster, apparently, was no longer listening to her. He was getting high off the food, and Paloco herself was upset seeing all this. After a while, Kiggy and Elizabeth, they were looking at something on the phone. The hen was trying to find something. The rooster asked what news there was, and she said it was bad because there was only a video of the demon who had killed Sara on the internet, and since then, nothing else had appeared. Clark thought about it and then said that, in any case, he had no choice but to go to the place where the white demon had appeared, and the Hen said that if she were there, maybe she could find some clues, but then she realized that the place was quite far from them, 250 kilometers to be exact. And then, the chickens turned and began to look around, interested in knowing where Pillow was. They showed us some steps. It's a descent to the beach near the river, and on them lay a grasshopper. And someone asked if this grasshopper was all there was. He was surrounded by 4 lizards. One of them asked the dark lizard, "Are you kidding me?" And the biggest lizard added that he said he had to. "Bring 10. The dark lizard began to apologize and tremble with fear. He couldn't bring 10, but the lead lizard and the large, scarred one asked if he was deaf and didn't understand. He had learned of the consequences. It scared the black lizard very much. The leader opened his mouth wide and screamed at the Moor, lunging at the victim, but then someone stopped him. A mysterious shadow descended the steps, and we see Pyoko in a fighting stance, standing in front of the dark lizard. Pyoko asked if the lizard was hurt, and he replied that he was fine. The scarred lizard asked her who the hell she was, and Pyoko replied that she was a chicken. She turned her back to the villains and showed off her tattoo. She shouted that her name is named Clack, lives on a farm, in a chicken coop, with his girlfriend, without a care in the world. But somewhere deep down, Clack realizes that this kind of life isn't for him, and he decides about to eat them herself. But Clack couldn't resist the treat, and ate it too, seemingly waiting for Sina to persuade him. But she didn't. He asked Sina if she was born in Pyoko. She is a bird of justice, and she does not forgive bad guys like him. And Pyoko relaxed and exhaled. The boss lizard said that she is just a chick, and asked how she planned to defeat them. He said that he who seeks always finds. The lizards opened their mouths and ran frantically, screaming that they would kill her, but they only nipped at her lightly, and the dark lizard watched her in surprise. Pyoko got tired of standing there and hit her opponents with her paw, sending them flying into the air. The chicken began to furiously trample the lizards, one by one, and when she, tired and feeling secure, Pyoko said she didn't want to see them do any more bad things. But then, the scarred lizard asked her if she thought it was the end. Pyoko did not take his threat seriously. She started kicking his ass and told him to come closer, saying she would make a woman's bag out of him. The main lizard looked at her angrily. His whole body hurt, and he said that he would never forgive her. Never forgive her. He would never forgive her. His eyes began to darken, and his body became covered in a black symbiote. Some flesh started coming out of the lizard's back, and the chicken kept kicking his ass, mocking the lizard. But the dark lizard was not amused at all. Liquid and flesh continued to pour from lizard's back, and the other lizards were already terrified enough. Like they wanted to run away and avoid seeing what would happen next, but the hen wasn't very happy about that either. It opened its mouth, and its eyes widened, and in a moment, we see a giant demon monster with many big eyes, sharp claws, and a huge mouth full of sharp teeth, running after the chicken. Barely managing to escape from it, Pillow continued running, his paws carrying him towards the city, but the monster kept up its pace as well. Despite its enormous size, it moved surprisingly quickly. Then the demon opened its mouth and stuck out its tongue, which split open to reveal 4. In Brazil, Sina told him how much she missed the sunsets she used to watch there with her sisters, near the Amazon River. Clark then asked Sina why. Jaws filled with teeth right in front of the hen, who opened her eyes in surprise. The monster began to attack with its tongue, easily destroying the pavement, while Pyoko dodged the attacks. The blows landed with little skill, and perhaps even luck, but then the chicken tripped on a rock, fell, and after a few somersaults, slammed into the wall. The monster caught up to Nave and cornered her, growling and sticking out its slimy tongue to scare the chicken. She trembled with fear, and then the demon opened its tongue, revealing all the mouths. The toothed mouths prepared to tear their victim apart. But then a miracle happened. Ki appeared and, with a single leap, knocked down the monster's ugly tongue. He was followed by a chicken descending on a rope, right over the monster's head, and electrocuted it. The monster shrieked, and its corpse fell to the ground, right in the center of the city. The hen and the rooster ran towards Pyoko, who was sitting on the sidewalk. Elizabeth asked if she was hurt, but the chicken only stared at them. Pyoko bowed her head in silence, got up, and walked away in an unknown direction. "Elizabeth," she called out, but he could no longer hear her, and the chickens silently watched the hen. A couple of hours later, the sun was beginning to set, gray clouds were gathering, and somewhere in the grass, near the river, Knave was sitting, feeling frustrated. She was thinking about how weak she was and wondering why she kept trying. She wanted to be useful. She wanted to help Rooster-san like Elizabeth, but it always turns out that she is the one who needs saving. She remembered how Ki had said that he wasn't hungry and that he could take her portion, and hanging her head, she thought that was all she was good for. She considered herself useless and a burden to her friends, and then she thought again. But then she had her doubts about those words and started to think about what she could do to help Rooster-san, and she thought again. He had moved to Japan, and Sina explained that about 20 years ago, he had been placed in a cramped cage to perform for an audience every day. At first, he didn't like it, but tears filled her eyes, and she realized that she could hardly go on any longer. Together, Ki, the chicken, and the rooster found the hen who was still sitting on the beach, looking upset. Clack. He asked Elizabeth what was wrong, and she replied that she seemed depressed. Then, thinking about it, the chicken mentioned that something was bothering him. They had been traveling with Pillow for a month, but he hadn't grown at all. Elizabeth asked if Clack thought it was strange, but the rooster was also alarmed, and suddenly another rooster appeared behind them, causing our heroes to turn around to see who it was. There he was. In front of them stood a battered and injured rooster, covered in blood, the very same one who had escaped from the demons and the mutant men. Ki asked him who he was, and the rooster was trembling. He was tired, but he happily said that he had finally found his older brother. These words shocked the chickens. They wanted to ask the rooster some questions, but they didn't have the time. He collapsed to the ground, exhausted. Elizabeth and Killy rushed over to him. The hen asked him what had happened, and the rooster looked at her silently with surprised eyes. And then we transitioned to a new day. Under the railway, Clack and Piloko practiced on the grass, counting 309, 310, 311, 312. The rooster could barely stand, trembling with exhaustion. He was dripping with sweat and had almost no strength left, but he continued standing, and the count continued. 315, 316, and then we see the rooster carrying a huge stone on his back, and not far from him sat Piloko, who, she kept counting. 318, 319. The rooster was temporarily distracted from counting by her thoughts. Even if I practice, nothing will change, she remembered her father saying, who told her to eat a lot and would grow bigger. She missed her father, and she missed him very much. Meanwhile, we are shown the other side of the railway, where Elizabeth was sitting, and the rooster, who introduced himself as Clack's brother. One day, he realized that all the visitors who watched him were smiling happily and laughing. Seeing them happy made him happy as well. Clark wondered how Sina could clack, and then this rooster started to open his eyes, but then he covered them again, and then he opened them again, and raised his head in fear. His wounds were reversing, and it was seen that he was. While healing Elizabeth, he also got up and was happy that she was awake, but the mysterious rooster remained silent. He tried to be kind, and said he was very glad that she was all right, but then he screamed loudly. Elizabeth told him it would be best if he continued resting so his wounds would heal faster. He was in shock, or rather, he was flustered by a girl and he asked if she had been taking care of him. Elizabeth said that ever since he had fallen ill, she had been taking care of him the entire time, and he started yelling and asking if she had been there for him all along. The rooster, impressed, thanked the hen wholeheartedly and bowed to her, and she looked at him in surprise. The hen realized that this guy was bad at communicating with hens and laughed, because he could use it for his own purposes. After nodding his head, the rooster felt unwell, screamed in pain, and began to fall to the ground, but Elizabeth caught him and told him that he needed rest more. The rooster was very worried and barely managed to say he was okay, and the hen hugged him with her wings and sweetly asked him to rest with her a little longer, and in his subconscious, he was laughing because he was genuinely embarrassed. But then someone struck the rooster with a leg, sending him flying a couple of meters, and it was the angry Kiji who had come to ask his questions. The wounded rooster was happy to see his older brother, but Clack didn't like it at all. He asked him not to call him that. Our hero looked at him angrily and retorted that he did call him brother, and then he slept for 2 whole days, and now he has finally woken up and is already bothering the hens. The rooster began to worry and wanted to justify himself, but Clack interrupted him, saying he didn't care. Not be angry with those people. But Sina honestly said that he did dislike them a little. But it didn't matter, because he had found a family in this zoo where he said he didn't have a little brother, and demanded to know where he came from. The rooster, still worried and embarrassed, then said his name was Kuki, and that he was Clack's half-brother. The rooster gaped with, those words couldn't possibly be true. Medio Hermano, Polo, and Pillow were equally surprised by what they heard, and awaited his next move. Kigi once again wore an intimidating expression. He began cursing and insisted it was all a lie, questioning how anyone could believe it. These words wounded Kesuke, leaving him unsure of what to say or how to explain. Then, he mentioned that they had met as children. The rooster. She considered it, studying him intently, but couldn't recall anything. Then, it suddenly clicked. It was him. And then, we're transported back in time, to when Clack's father and his mother Sara, were enjoying a summer day. Incidentally, his sister is also named Sara. The rooster gathered flowers and made a crown for the hen, and a hen was running nearby, laughing and trying to chase a butterfly. Sara accepted the gift, delighted that such a rooster had made it for her. She placed the crown on her head and asked how it looked. The rooster was a little embarrassed, but he said Sara looked great. She laughed sweetly and thanked him. And then a chicken jumped onto his back and asked him to guess who it was. He started playing along with them and said he didn't know who it was. Little Clack laughed. Then, the father smiled and said he knew it was Key. The hen was surprised and asked how he had guessed. Then, they burst out laughing. Little Key climbed onto his father's head and hugged his crest, telling him that he loved him. After a while, they were at home in the garden, and Key asked his mother to go for a walk. She let him go, but told him to be careful of the cats. Clack was walking along the path, and suddenly, he heard his father's voice encouraging him and telling him to climb. Supports and encourages each other. This family is real to him, and everything that happens here is a part of his life. All of these birds are members of his family, and he cherishes them. Suddenly, noises could be heard. Onto his back. Key looked behind a bush and called out to his father. There he saw his father with a chicken on his back, and he marveled at how high up he was, next to his father. A hen was sitting. The hen wondered if that chicken really was her father. Maybe she had mistaken him for someone else. She kept watching, but suddenly he noticed her. That hen, and Clack hid. Quickly and miraculously, she hoped they wouldn't see him. He wondered who they were, and didn't understand why they were so close to his father. But then, someone interrupted him. Kiki turned to see who was there, and saw a chicken standing there, asking if Clack was from around there and offering to play. Little Kesuke smiled, and Key looked at him with wide eyes, surprised, open with surprise. Then Clack took off running, surprising the chicken, and we returned to our own time. Clack realized that the chicken was him. Kesuke said that at the time, he didn't know it, but later they told him that Clack was his older brother. Key kept staring at him, trying to find something familiar, but it was difficult. Kesuke also looked at his brother and realized how he had changed the subject, but then got straight to the point. He had found Clack because he needed his help. His father had been captured by a demon, and Kesuke was asking him if he would help save him. Clack and Elizabeth looked at him in amazement. Kesuke continued, saying that he knew Clack was traveling now, fighting demons and monsters. Key asked why his father said that, but Kuki continued. Speaking of his problem, he said that the enemies are very strong, so he needs his brother's help. Clack remained silent, and Kesuke said that he knew he was asking too much. And then Kesuke, he started shouting abruptly, saying that he really wants to save his father, so he needs his help. Key thought for a moment, and suddenly said that he refuses, which our heroes did not. Horrific destruction and the screams of people filled the air. A monster appeared, and chaos reigned everywhere. People and animals fled from the monster, which resembled a caterpillar due to its abundance of arms and, they expected to hear. They seemed surprised. Elizabeth asked how he could abandon his father, but Clack remained silent, and then said that since his father was gone, he no longer cared what happened to him. What would happen to him? He closed his eyes and began to remember the moment in the winter garden when Clack's mother and Clack were there, begging his father not to leave. He paused for a moment, and he closed his eyes. It was obvious that he didn't want to, but he started to leave. Even as Key the chicken called out to him, little Clack's tears began to flow. He was very worried about the departure of his father, and as soon as he thought he couldn't live without his father, he cried out for his dad. After a while, Clack's mother was very emotionally stressed, and Clack approached to ask his mother how she was doing. Clack told her that everything was fine and smiled, but it was clear he looked unwell. One morning, Clack and little Sara discovered that their mother had died. He had only one hen left, his little sister Sara. She had been born from the last egg that Mom and Dad had laid, and the hen had kept her warm until her very last breath. Little Key approached his mother and began to cry. He began to wonder why she was killing herself over such a small thing. Why? And then he ran to his mother, hugged her with his wings, and screamed, "Mom," and cried loudly. Meanwhile, our heroes continued talking under the railroad. Key said that it was a fact that he had caused his mother to get sick and die, that he would never forgive him for killing his mother. Never. Kesuke began to process the information and said that he felt sorry that Clack had to go through all that, but that, after all, it had nothing to do with his father. Key got angry and asked what he was talking about, but he didn't let him answer, and asked again what he knew about it. He came closer to his brother and said, "That rooster is a son of..." Pause. It was the same monster that Clack had sensed 3 days prior. Sina was petrified when she saw the monster that had just broken through the glass ceiling of the cage, shattering it into pieces. These and was raised by a son of. And then he asked if the other knew what he went through. Kesuke hesitated. The only thing in his head was what Clack had called his father. Our hero continued, smiled, and he said that if he didn't like him calling his father a son of a, he could just call him trash. Kesuke didn't react to those words at all, and then stated that he wasn't interested in the opinion of, fell upon him, but his father was his object of adoration and a martial artist. But then Kuki declared that if he insulted his father again, he wouldn't forgive him, even if he was his brother. The atmosphere shifted slightly, and Elizabeth noticed it as well. She stepped between the roosters and said she thought it was enough already, but Ki didn't think the same. His angry expression didn't change, and his body had already tensed up as he approached his brother. They glared at each other menacingly, and Ki said, "That thing is even worse than trash. It doesn't deserve to live." And then a blow landed. Kuki struck our hero with his right wing, but he managed to dodge it, performing a couple of backflips, and Poloko yelled at the rooster to stop. To stop him, the rooster grew angry at his brother's actions, and he took off running, then extended his leg to attack, but the rooster moved away. The rooster turned sideways, and Kuki was already preparing a wing attack, but it was a deceptive maneuver, and the attack landed on Ki with his paw. He wasn't about to be defeated so easily, blocking the blow with his wings and moving away. Kesuke didn't let the rooster escape the blow, and was already running to launch a new attack with his paw, executing a slash, but Clack dodged by doing a somersault, and, in mid-flight, turned his paw and struck his brother, who rolled onto his wings and began to spin and kick, and this blow unexpectedly hit Ki right in the head. Clack quickly backed away to consider another tactic. They were evenly matched opponents, and surprised not only themselves but also Elizabeth. Clack? Events brought Sina back to her senses, and before the monster could attack again, she pounced on it, hoping to save her precious family. Sina tried to hurt the form, began to advance again, stretched, and flew his left leg straight toward the rooster. Killy began to flap his wings to stay airborne, and continued attacking his opponent with his paw, left and his right paw, but all the blows missed. His brother is super fast, much faster than Clack. When our hero started to lose speed, Kesuke slashed at him and knocked him down. Ki's paw. Then, he intercepted him as he fell and delivered an uppercut to his stomach with his paw. Although the blow was powerful, our hero didn't fall, and the rooster was sent sideways. Clack he was out of breath and badly hurt, and he tried to hide it, but Elizabeth noticed and said in a faint voice that Ki was getting sick. Izuki remained serious and confident, but for some reason, he began to provoke his brother, asking, "Is that all you can do?" Clack flew into a rage, ran towards his brother, and told him to go to hell, and then began to attack with his paws in flight rapidly. His brother also flew up to meet him, and successfully blocked all of his blows. These attacks continued in different locations, and Kesuke realized something. He saw that Clack was making too many unnecessary movements, and was too slow. Clack was tired again, and his stances were faltering. Kesuke still seemed fresh and alert, and he told his brother that enough was enough, they needed to stop here. Ki was barely breathing and dripping with sweat, and he didn't understand what Kesuke was talking about. The man didn't want to stop until he killed his brother. Kesuke exhaled in disappointment. Then he stood up and said that he had no other choice. The rooster steeled himself and began to wait for the next attack. He told him, "Get ready." Then he bowed slightly and said, "Defend." Moving forward, the rooster raised his wings and spread his legs. Clack stared in amazement at the unusual pose and didn't know what to expect, so Kesuke said, "Fire." Instantly, the rooster was next to Clack before he monster by attacking it with her beak, but there was no way to stop it. All the birds were eager to escape from the cage as quickly as possible. The monster threw Sina to the ground. The platypus's attention could even blink. The enemy's paw was already on his stomach. There was a shockwave in Ki's belly, and the powerful paw stopped. It was a shockwave, and Clack flew away, like a cannonball pierced the ground for dozens of meters, startling the chickens, and leaving CL unconscious in the hole he had created with his own body, along with Elizabeth. He looked at Kesuke, and realized that this guy was very strong, standing proudly in a pompous pose. Now we are transported to another city, to an abandoned and old house, where a reunion was taking place. Tied up and dripping with blood, this old rooster was bound with a bunch of metal pipes and badly beaten. He was barely alive. In another city, Kuki was sitting on the roof of a tall building, looking puzzled. He was watching the sunset and thought that, in the end, his brother's skills wouldn't be of much use. Even if they teamed up, they still wouldn't be able to defeat those mutants. Kesuke had a fight with his brother and began to think about what to do, but he was interrupted by the thought of his father, because while they were fighting, their father might have Having witnessed the rooster's murder, he began to feel grief for his father, and then he screamed and jumped off the building. He can't give up now, and we transition to the same railroad where everything has been happening lately. Clack approached the river and stood pensively on a rock with Elizabeth watching him. She gazed at him, thinking it must be a huge shock for him. She still couldn't believe that he had lost. It must have been his first defeat. And then Elizabeth was startled to see a cheerful Pillow running towards them. He carried 2 worms in his beak and flapped his wings. Pillow called out to the rooster, and he turned around. She smiled and told him that he had to eat because it would make him feel better. Suddenly, Key said he didn't want to eat, which was strange because the rooster always that he needs to change something in his life and makes the decision to leave. Clack's girlfriend was heartbroken by this declaration and begged him not to leave, but the rooster explained, was fixed on Sina, who was lying on the ground. At that moment, something collided with the monster. It was Clack, furious about everything that was happening. The birds wondered how a visitor liked to eat, but now he refused, and she began to cry. Elizabeth interrupted her thoughts and told Pillow to give him time, and the hen looked at the rooster, who was still standing there. Thinking about it, he realized his body wasn't ready, and he was getting angry. In that last attack, he could barely see his brother's movements, and that blow was so tangible that his insides exploded. Such a blow was simply impossible. Rooster sensed someone's footsteps behind him and then swore he was going to kill that son of a... It was Kesuke, which startled him. Clack. When he turned to face it, the rooster abruptly jumped to another rock further away. Key looked at his brother menacingly and said that he would do it right now, that this time he would take care of him, definitely. Definitely from him, once and for all. But Kesuke argued that he hadn't come to see his brother to fight, that he regretted what had happened, and that he believed it was his fault. Clack, no. He didn't understand what he meant and was still angry with him, and Kuki didn't know what else to say. Then Kesuke began to say that he just wanted to save their father, because if he died, the world would be at the mercy of... Damn. Clack remained thoughtful, intrigued by what his brother was saying, and Kuki continued, saying that his father was a rooster who could never die. Then he said he needed their help to save his father, and called him older brother. Clack remained silent, though not surprised. He had a lot to think about. Elizabeth interrupted Kasui's story by asking if she could ask him a question, and the rooster turned sharply and said, of course she could. It was obvious that he was very worried. While talking to the rooster, Elizabeth pointed out that he had said that his father was not supposed to die, and that Suuk didn't understand what he meant. Then he said that he was sure they would be surprised by such coincidences. Everyone in their family fights against the... A stranger was able to control such a large monster. This angered the monster, and it decided to finish off Clack. However, Clack dodged the attack and ended up right in front of the monster's face. Demons. No matter if you're an adult or a chicken. The rooster remained silent, but didn't say anything, although from his expression it was clear that he was very surprised. The rooster asked why, but Kesuke, he just said that thoughtfully, out of the blue, and then mentioned it was a mission from his 5-colored rooster clan, which surprised Key even more. Kesuke explained that his clan is deeply connected to the demons. They are the only ones who can defeat them. Clack began to question himself, wondering why his father's mission was to destroy all demons, what else the clan was about, and what the rooster was talking about. Rooster. Elizabeth paused to consider, and then said that if he wanted to help, the rooster had better tell him what happened to his father. Azuki didn't mind, and began his story. It happened 5 days ago. They were walking through the city searching for traces of the demon. Kesuke told his father that he could still smell demons in this town, and his father paused thoughtfully for a moment. He started to smell something, and then said it was a foul odor, but he was old, and his senses weren't what they used to be. He realized who the smell belonged to, abruptly ran forward, and told his son to follow him. Suki started running after her father and asked him if he was a demon, but the old rooster stopped near the chicken coop, saying he had found what he was looking for, a chicken. Then, he turned to his son and asked him to forgive him for being distracted for a second, but Kuki told him no, because they needed to find the demon. The father began to plead with Kesuke, his eyes burning, and drooling with desire, but he said he was afraid, and Elizabeth commented that the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, since Clack was also addicted to the attention of chickens, and Kuki followed his father. No, he didn't have time to say anything, as he was interrupted by some screams. It was a small demon with a body that was half fish and half man. His mouth was full of sharp teeth, and his hands were... Anger appeared on Clack's face because of what the monster had done. Seeing Clack in front of it, the monster went numb, and its face burst open just like the previous one. Like piranhas, the monster chased the girl into a dark alley, and its fish head addressed the demon as if it were a sister, telling him that it was time for them to do it. The The girl screamed loudly, and the two roosters stared at them, wanting to help, but then they realized there was another person behind them. Kuki started shouting that they had to save the girl, but the father, he told them to wait. The guy seemed calm and didn't seem scared by the demon only a meter away, which Kuki didn't expect because he was used to people running away from demons. The monster himself, was surprised by the insolent man and asked who he was. But when the fish tilted its head, the man instantly killed the monster with his outstretched arm, punching it on the forehead. The dead fish demon fell to the ground. The girl was so shocked that she stopped screaming, and the guy just stared at the corpse. The roosters didn't know how to react to such a thing. But then the guy sprouted wings from his back, and the roosters realized he wanted to leave and chased after him. He grabbed the corpse of the demon fish and flew away in the direction unknown. The roosters paused, but then suddenly started chasing after that man. The father told his son that they had to catch up to him, and Suki agreed. The roosters continued to run after him. Through villages and forests, their pursuit led them to a familiar building. Kesuke's father stopped and watched the man land, hide his wings, and begin to drag the corpse of the Pez demon into the abandoned building with considerable ease. They began to enter, hiding behind the corner as the man continued dragging the monster from one room to another. The man opened the doors at the far end, threw the corpse inside, and closed them. His father didn't understand why he came here. He wouldn't just leave the demon here, would he? But it seemed that was exactly what he did. Clack defeated the monster again. Everyone gathered around Sina, who was very weak after her encounter with the monster. Clack assured her that everything was all right, and that everyone started heading in the opposite direction, and then completely left the building, with the roosters watching him. As soon as he was gone, the father and son started running toward the room. Mysteriously, the father suggested to Kesuke that they go and see what was there, and the son agreed. They continued running, but then they noticed an open door to the left, with shadows that appeared to be demons. The father was very surprised and stopped in front of this room, telling him to halt, but Kazuki didn't understand why his father had stopped. He was contemplating what his father had seen. He was surprised and almost fell, but managed to react. He stood in front of the room next to his father, and inside the room were dozens of monsters in formation, like soldiers, and all very different. Some looked like cows or wild boars, while others resembled humans, toads, or insects. Kasui asked what kind of demons they were. They didn't seem to have murderous instincts and remained quietly still, but their father said that wasn't true. They only appeared lifeless, like just a shell. But why are there so many? Kesuke asked. That guy was responsible, and father thought about it, but then said, even if he did, what the hell is he going to do about it? But then the father got distracted by something, heard gunshots, and quickly pushed his son out of the way to save him from the bullets. But then the father was intercepted by some long object and realized that it was no use fighting back, and his son began to worry about him, now that Suki was alone against two unknown opponents. Although they weren't entirely unknown, as they were the same two mutant men. One of them was holding a tied-up rooster hostage, and the other was shooting at it with a pistol to use the pistol. He transformed his hand into a gun, and it was already pathetically smoking. The younger boy, whose name was Hikari, said that he knew they were being followed. Kesuke began they had been saved and that everyone was safe. Sina smiled and thanked Clack for saving her family. All the birds gathered near Sina and cried, begging her not to die. She get angry because he hadn't realized they were coming, and the man asked Hikari if he was sure it was them, to which Hikari confirmed that it was. They began to say that those roosters were descendants of the five-colored rooster clan, and they were pleased with the unusual prey. Kesuke didn't like that they knew so much, and he asked how they knew. He said he had received a message from his mistress, and they had many questions. Kesuke was surprised that these people, or demons, understood him, and then he decided to clarify which one they were. Hikari said that they are absolutely not demons, and adopting a cold posture, said that yes, they are demons, and they are the chosen ones. Kesuke wondered what kind of demons they were, but he didn't have time to think. The guy then said, and then ordered them to grab the rooster. Then, two demons flew towards Kesuke. Apparently, Hikari had given them decent numbers and activated them by voice, but why they obeyed was a mystery. The first to attack was the scorpion demon, who tried to grab the rooster with its claw, but the rooster dodged it by jumping to the side. Then, he instantly flew towards its face, and he struck out with his right paw. Now it was his turn to attack the second demon, which looked like a man with many tentacled legs. He began trying to grab Kesuke, but the agile young rooster, he easily dodged each tentacle and then jumped. He propelled himself from the ceiling and delivered a powerful blow with 2 claws right in the middle of the monster's head. The demonic octopus definitely felt that hit, and the rooster flew away into the distance. The man smiled and said that he understood him, and then he began to transform his hand into a minigun, and, with the words, "Let's play," he began to shoot at Kesuke. The rooster did not expect to see something like that, but he still managed to react and began to flee from the bullets. The man continued shooting at Kesuke. It was obvious that he was quite good with a gun and accurate, promised them that she would always watch over them. In her final moments, Sina remembers her sisters, Lana and Elena, and dreams of seeing the sunset with them once more. With these words, Sina closes her eyes. But not enough for our hero. He skillfully jumped over the poles, armors, and walls. Although the rooster was fast, the bullets from the minigun came very close, and when the rooster, he jumped off the wall and landed, and we see a bullet hit its target. Kuki was wounded in a spot similar to the shoulder, much like you often see in action movies. Hikari realized that rooster wasn't easy to kill, but the man said he could do it. He pointed his gun at Kesuke. Hikari and the rooster's father were standing next to him, and 2 huge, furious demons were on each side of him. Kesuke thought he could handle 2 demons, but it was unlikely he could resist those devils, or whatever they were. Hikari asked the rooster what he would do, but his father didn't allow him to tell his son. He had asked him to leave earlier, but Kesuke didn't want to do that. Well, he had no other choice. He instantly turned around and began to flee, hoping that he would definitely come back and save his father. He just needed to wait a little while. A few hours later, an injured Kesuke was sitting under the cars in the parking lot. He was bleeding, but he didn't. His own injuries were secondary. He was preoccupied with how he could save his father. He realized doing it alone would be difficult, but it would be different if he had help, and he pondered this. But then, he abruptly recalled something, that his father had told him he had an older brother. His father had said his name was Ki, and that the day would come when they would fight side by side against evil. Kesui was happy to have hope, knowing he had an older brother. But the question was, how would he find him? After a while, Kesuke was walking around the city, contemplating how to find him, when then he overheard someone saying he had to see that rooster. Kesuke turned around. 2 boys were walking from school, looking at their phones, and they were amazed, and remained silent. No one can believe that old Xena is gone. Clack pays his respects, taking one of her feathers, and promises to bring Xena's news to his sisters about how a rooster blew off a demon's head, and those words piqued Kesuke's interest greatly. The boy was watching the same video that the cameraman had uploaded to internet and became popular. A schoolboy mentioned hearing that he had appeared in town yesterday, and Suuk realized it was his brother. The rooster then began searching for Clack, asking for directions to get to the city. A crow helped him, saying it was 3 mountains away and gesturing with its wing. Then he met a mother cat who had once stolen from Pillow to feed her kittens. She said she had seen him at the other end of the station. And finally, we cut to our heroes and the conclusion of the kidnapping story. Kesuke said that it ultimately took him 3 days to find Clack. Elizabeth and Clack were pensive, not expecting the story to unfold that way. Clack mentioned that even he couldn't defeat those monsters and didn't understand who those demons were, while Ki remained silent. Kesuke told Elizabeth that they were likely creating puppets in this warehouse and plotting something terrible. He has to stop them. Kesuke became sad and then said that, to be honest, it was obvious that it would be difficult to defeat him. But he added that didn't mean he would abandon his father. He didn't want to lose him, and a tear ran down his face. Our heroes looked thoughtful, and it would seem that there was an opportunity here for Clack to support his brother, but he remained silent. Even Elizabeth tried to hint at it to him in some way. She thought that everything would be in vain, and then she started reaching for her backpack and asked where the Kamsa place where his father had been captured was. Kesuke still couldn't properly communicate with the chicken, but this time, he said more confidently that he believed it was an abandoned factory on the Casa, Brazil. He would make sure to remember how much she loved her family and that she never forgot them, having lived a decent life. With those words, Clack began to leave again, but Xena gave him outskirts of Fujima City, and the chicken quickly found the route and told him the approximate location, which was 50 kilometers west of there. Kesuke exclaimed in surprise and wondered how the chicken was using a smartphone, and she commented that she didn't realize they were so useful after all, and kept clicking on something on her phone. Kuki thought Elizabeth was a charming airhead, as the airhead was checking the latest news and mentioned that there were demons in Fujimori. Then, a sudden change came over her face, shocked by what she saw, and she called out to Ki. Elizabeth stated that they needed to head there, and passed his phone to Ki. He watched the video and was equally surprised. There was a demon that looked like Mario, but Mario was a good demon. He couldn't believe that it started to destroy things and scare people. Something was definitely wrong. Pillow was also surprised, saying that the demon in the video was a good demon, and questioned why he was doing that. And Kuki asked Ki if he knew him. Ki didn't hear their questions. He was just wondering why Mario was doing all of this. Music. One last surprise. The grasshoppers with which she had fed Clack earlier made themselves heard once more. Clack fell motionless to the ground, and for this reason, Clack remained on the ground for a few more days. In the middle of the blue ocean, a barrel rocked peacefully on the waves. Clack floated in this barrel with an impassive face, waiting to see and reach land. He was found by a scuba diver who was diving in. That this wasn't his lifestyle, that he wasn't cut out for it, that he felt he needed adventure, and that he dreamed of independence. He might be weak sometimes, but that was only the fault of search of fish and shellfish, and who dragged Clack to the shore. Meanwhile, the fish in the water swam carefree, bored stiff, until someone appeared. It was a one-eyed turtle. That she was not well liked by the sea inhabitants, as the ocean dwellers instilled fear in them. All the fish would flee, but the turtle changed its target to a bird on. The shore then caught his attention. The man on the shore offered Clack a sea urchin for him to eat. Although it had a creepy appearance, Clack wasn't sure if it was edible, but still, he took a small bite. For the first time, his expression changed. He didn't regret his action. It was much tastier than worms and bedbugs, the most delicious thing he had ever tasted. But he snapped back to reality when he saw a huge turtle crawling to the shore and glaring at him with an unfriendly look. One of its eyes had been gouged out, perhaps in a fight or due to some accident. The turtle made it clear to Clack that he hated birds and would destroy him if he didn't leave. Clack calmly replied that since he didn't know how to swim, he wasn't going anywhere. Then, he proceeded to ask the turtle, stating that if it truly was his territory, he should know every corner of it. For example, where the sea urchins lived. The turtle was left speechless by this response to the faced with the threat of death. He yelled at Clack to leave while he still could. Clack didn't take him seriously and insisted that they bring him the sea urchins. The turtle was seething with rage because no one had ever. He had disrespected him so much, so he was done giving chances. He lunged at Clack to strike him, but Clack managed to evade the attack. Clack realized that this was no ordinary turtle. Anyone. And the turtle realized that Clack was not just any bird. Clack wasn't going to back down, and once again asked the turtle about the sea urchins. The turtle was tired of the nature, not hers. Clack continued on his way downtown to find a goal he could work toward for the rest of his life. In the morning, Clack was very hungry, but getting, cackling, and his constant demands regarding the sea urchins. In a fit of rage, he threw stones at Clack, an attack called Stone Splash. The rooster deftly backed away, perhaps even flying away. He took the offensive, launching lightning at the turtle, but with less power than he used against the monsters, careful not to kill it. The turtle was no ordinary fighter either, skillfully dodging the attack. However, he was surprised by the rooster's powerful attack, but he didn't give up, as the turtle kept blocking his blows. Now the fight was becoming increasingly interesting. This time, it directly hit Clack, who jumped to the side, landing on top of the shell. But before he could attack, the turtle struck again, preventing Clack from retaliating. The battle continued with neither side willing to yield, but the turtle noticed something and stopped fighting. A fishing hook had pierced Clack's leg, but he continued to fight even. Wounded, the turtle's pride wouldn't allow him to fight and defeat an injured bird, so he stopped the fight. He approached Clack to help him remove the hook from his leg. Clack appreciated his help. Opponent and honestly admitted that he would have lost the battle against him in the water. Once things had more or less calmed down, Clack decided to ask the turtle why he didn't like birds. They liked birds. The turtle explained that sea turtles like himself are born on the beach and struggle through the sand to reach the ocean, as if the ocean was calling to them. He recalled that when he and his siblings were almost crawling towards the ocean, seagulls would appear and begin devouring his brothers and sisters right in front of him. That cruelty was his first experience in the real world, something he could forget, and his first memory. Turtle managed to escape and trained for 3 years to eventually avenge the birds for their actions. After he had dealt with them, not a single